Thanks for coming on the show, dude.
Oh, totally. I'm super stoked. I had somehow not found your show, despite it being huge. And then when I went to look it up, I started finding like all my heroes and people that I would die to talk to, and people whose books I have like annotated and stuff. So it was so cool to like, find a huge resource of information that I'm looking for, to like see an interview with John Perkins, see an interview with Christian and
Zach,
his partner, who made that doc, like
crazy doc.
Yeah. So it's just like, okay, clearly these are conversations that I need to learn from, and you must be accumulating so much knowledge about like so many cool, wild avenues of what's really going on out here.
Dude, there's so much out there. It's hard to keep it all in your brain. My hard drive is like overloaded. But it's fun. And you, like, when did you blow up on Twitter and become so famous for talking about all this crazy shit?
I blew up on Twitter because of the Diddy trial, and I might have been the first one that made the connection. It was actually one of my followers that made the connection. It wasn't me, because I'm not actually all that smart. I'm just good at explaining things, good at taking notes, and like I was a teacher, so I'm good at that process. But a follower was like, yo, Diddy's fixer guy in that court document, in those lawsuits, that was Michael Jackson's head of security. And so then I went and started looking into Michael Jackson and realized that this guy, Fahim Muhammad, is like so sus. He became the king of pop's head of security at age 21, fresh out of college with a business and marketing degree. And then on his watch, Michael Jackson just happens to die, and he's this like second or third on the scene. And then he immediately is like rewarded, apparently, essentially, by going and being the head of Diddy's security and essentially running this whole sexual blackmail scheme that Diddy was running. Yeah. And putting that together was kind of groundbreaking, and Candace Owens picked it up and started pushing it out. And that was probably like when I blew up on X and specifically, but I had blown up on TikTok first, which was kind of strategic, but for sort of very different content, very much more like mainstream kind of. That was when I was a little more less knowledgeable about what's really going on. And as I started to hone in on like the bigger questions and essentially started talking about more and more censored topics, TikTok more and more was censoring my videos and taking stuff down. And so X kind of came into my space at just the right time, when I needed a platform where I could start talking about Epstein, start talking about the CIA.
Was that like right when Elon took over?
No, it was a while after Elon took over. It's just when I got on X, because people had been kind of encouraging. They were seeing how like censored and banned I was on TikTok, and they'd been encouraging me for quite some time to go try out X. It was like mostly my crypto homies, and like there's a few accounts that were specifically like, yo, you got to come over to Twitter. It's where it's happening. And I was resistant for a long time. And then the moment I got over there, it only took like a day or two, and I realized like this is 100% where the conversations are happening. Both because it's where there is more freedom of speech. It's not infinite, but also like the format just allows for like, because you can share evidence, you can link tweets to tweets. It just has a format that allows for discussion and debate directly in the comments of every post, that TikTok is like, okay, 200 characters with no links. Like, what are you going to do with that? That's just a sensationalism machine. So,
isn't there something going on with Instagram? I heard where they're like curating the comments on Instagram. Have you heard about this?
A little bit, yeah.
Where they're like showing you only the comments that like you would agree with, or like that would get you to engage with them.
Instagram has a really weird set of algorithms going on, and they have this whole other dark side scandal thing about promoting like child content to pals. That's like a whole other thing. But they don't seem to censor videos like at all, or nearly as much in my experience personally, but they censor comments like crazy for like language, for content, for whatever. But then they also do these weird, like almost like sentiment manipulation things that you wouldn't realize they're doing. With TikTok, it's like pretty obvious that videos are getting taken down. People talk about it. But with Instagram, it's far more subtle and maybe subversive. I don't really know what to think of it.
Yeah, Instagram's so weird. I was talking about this the other day. Recently, I've been noticing that on posts on Instagram, like for Vice, for example, where they'll post a lot of like pro Biden, pro Kamala, anti-Trump shit. The comments would always be like, Vice, go home. You know what I mean? They'd be like more right-leaning, moderate comments, kind of like just like, what are you guys doing? And then over the last few weeks, I've noticed it's been just full on board Kamala Biden, like, let's go defeat Trump. Yeah. And it seems super suspicious. Like, what kind of bot campaign are they running here on Instagram?
Well, there's one level where the platforms are probably running that to a certain degree. I mean, we know they are. There's like leaks about that. Mm-hmm. But we also know that there are actual like intelligence agency bot farms. I was just looking into the one run by the Israeli dude the other day that's like super interesting, kind of a rabbit hole I haven't fully dissected yet. But we're in an age now where we all need to be aware that everyone you're talking to might be a bot. Mm-hmm. And they are getting pretty sophisticated now too.
Yeah. No, I had a guy on here a couple days ago who is like this crazy polymath dude who like just studies history and like republics and stuff. And he has this whole theory, comprehensive theory based on historical events on why there's going to be a civil war in America after the election.
That's dark.
And like he talks about like how it'll happen, why it'll happen, what are like the 4 reasons it will happen. But like what I came to realize is that like it feels like you're basing this all off of data that you've been reading online or from comments that you've been reading online, but you haven't really like gone outside and had a conversation with somebody. Yeah. And I'll say this again because it's a beautiful analogy to the real world. My friend Julian Dory came up with this. He calls it the Wawa theory. He goes like, you go online and you see, all this stuff like with Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, all these people on Twitter that are making it seem like the world is burning, right? But then you go to Wawa and you see the girl with the green hair opening the door, holding the door open for the guy with the Vietnam hat on.
Bingo.
So it's not really like that. The world's not burning down. It's only to the people that haven't seen sunlight in a decade who just focus on social media 24/7.
Yeah. And people like me that live in that journalism space, that like social media space, I think it's a trap a lot of us fall into of just your whole life starts to become these like culture wars and these like Twitter wars. And it's so critical that we like step out of it and just go live real life and just go hang out with different people and just be kind and like realize that like we're all still humans and no one is like ready to fight over anything. Like like there are bad people in this world, but they just get amplified on the internet so much. Mm-hmm. And I do think it's important, obviously, to be on the internet. Like, I think the job that people are doing on the internet of trying to figure out what's going on is critically important. Mm-hmm. And it's probably the most important like tool of power that common people have and have ever had in history. Like the ability to decentralize the control of information is revolutionary. Yeah. But it comes with a lot of learning and responsibility for us to sort of figure out how we maintain like social structure and just emotional health while using those tools for good.
Yeah.
And I don't think we figured that out at all.
No, definitely.
At all.
Yeah. It's crazy how boring summer's been since they shot Trump.
It's crazy how silent everyone's been since they shot Trump. I saw this meme.
Not enough's going on right now.
Dude, it was this meme that was about how fast the Trump shooting disappeared. And it was just like, think about all of the other news events that got a longer press cycle than Trump getting shot. Dude. It's like
the Olympic thing happened and then everyone forgot about Trump.
Bingo. Yeah. It's like, and that is such a wild rabbit hole where you either have to, and this, I run this kind of litmus test on all events, is either because everything has to have an explanation, even if it's mundane or it's not. It's like there's nothing in the world that happens for no reason. Like random is a reason, but random has to have probabilities involved. Like you have to be able to explain it and be like, cool, that's how it happened.
Right.
And so when you look at the Trump shooting, for example, you either have to think that all of the weird shit that happened is explainable by what they're telling you and that there's nothing suspicious about that kind of mainstream narrative about it, or you have to start asking a lot of questions. And almost all versions of there's something suspicious about this and there's questions to be asked, almost every version of that leads to at least some level of inside job or some level of someone being complicit in something. And there's a lot of versions of what that might be, but regardless of what that is, it's monumentally important because like that's an assassination attempt on one of the most important and polarizing figures in the last 50 years. Yeah. And it very well could have sparked things like World War III or things like massive government change. Like there's just so many implications that I think people are too politically charged right now to, like the Trump crowd is super gravitating towards it, obviously. Yeah. But everyone who is not down with Trump, I think is incentivized to ignore it because of that political leaning.
Yeah.
When like the implications of it should be apolitical. Because if suppose you didn't support JFK, the implications of JFK getting shot were still world changing for, you know, the rest of eternity. And so I think that in many ways, and this happens in all fields, like our polarization of our political like minds and emotions often makes people tune into things that don't matter and tune out things that are massively important. So I'm following that one super close because I think it's fascinating.
What is your theory on the Trump thing, the assassination attempt? What's your latest?
I think before we go into it, it's important to state that like anyone who thinks that they know what's happening in this world is way too confident in themselves. Like we don't even know how physics work. We don't know how gravity works. Like we don't know shit. But we can kind of like speculate on probabilities. And the way I like to think is just in terms of there's lots of possibilities and some are more likely than others. And as you get evidence, you kind of assess that one seems more likely to me, that one seems less likely, but I still just kind of keep them all in mind.
And there's probably way more evidence that's going to come out too.
Exactly. And it's not like you're so dumb that you can only think of one possibility and you can think about all three options at once. And as evidence comes in, you can weigh it against those three possibilities, right? So what I lean towards as being most likely is I think it's reasonably safe to assume at this point that it was a bullet that did go past his head, that grazed him or like right past his ear. And there was a photo of the bullet that is pretty much corroborated by mainstream news that is very anti-Trump normally. So it's like, and like people died. So there were definitely bullets. There was definitely shots. The audio analysis makes me think that there was more than one gun being fired. And it's like relatively easy to hear on basically every video that was taken by cell phones. In the fact, do you know what I'm referring to there?
The audio, now you're talking about the shots being fired?
Yeah. So like when you look at the videos, the shots that are fired is basically like three cracks that echo in one way, and then a very fast volley of 5 that echo in a different way. And there is an argument to be made that like the camera turns, and so maybe the phone is picking it up differently.
Right.
But I'm not necessarily convinced by that. And then there is like a sniper shot and another shot, and there's been other like highly experienced like combat veterans that have identified that they heard silenced rounds within that zone, like
silenced rounds.
Yeah, like. There's a really interesting clip that circulated around Twitter like a couple weeks ago of a Marine scout sniper, someone of that type of caliber, watching the footage, and the moment he hears it, he's like, "Oh, I know what that is." And they replay the sound a few times, and he's like, "You hear that? That is a like suppressed round, not a." And I don't think you don't need to know all that. Like you don't need to make decisions about that to realize that the level of incompetence is astounding. The fact that people were redirected, when you start to analyze like all of because we have a lot of footage of it now, and we have what looks like at first, had that been successful, had Trump been shot, there was indications that they had a story ready to pin it on Iran. Yeah. As in they were sort of like, we're trying to pin the bank accounts or the phones that he had on Iran, which are still not explained. Like what 21-year-old, 22-year-old guy has no social media presence, that the CIA and the NSA can't hack his phones, that like, that's bullshit.
I heard there was something that came out. I don't remember where I saw it, but I heard there was something where they were able to track the location, or NSA was able to track the location of a phone that was part of the household he was in that visited an FBI place a couple weeks before.
It wasn't the household he was in, is that he had gone to a weird bowling alley and had what looks like a meeting when you track cell phone data, and a few other, like there's not just government agencies, there's also dudes on Twitter that apparently have access to this cell phone data. Lots of people are tracking it. And yeah, he had what looks a lot like a meeting, like sit down in a spot for like 1.5 hours or whatever it is. I'm just kind of fudging numbers here, next to another device that then they both leave. And that device went to right next to FBI HQ.
Right.
Which is just indications. It's like all very suspicious. And the fact that he's able to get there, like people are seeing him. There's plainclothes officers that are clearly where everyone is pointing. Like there's a video, that one of the first ones that came out, everyone's like filming him and like, look, there's a guy on the roof.
Yeah.
And then in the other videos that came out more recently, you can see plainclothes officers with guns drawn come around the building once the shots have been fired from that direction where all those people were that were pointing at this guy. So there's just all these elements that point to like, this does not add up. And just the fact that it's suspicious, not necessarily saying you know what it is or what happened, but the fact that what they're telling us is suspicious, aligned with the fact that it looked like there was a story prepared about Iran, which would be very logical. I mean, Bibi just happened to have a speech to Congress scheduled for the next week.
Right.
And he still, during that speech, ran with this he basically said in that speech that Iran tried to assassinate Trump, that
Well, it's convenient.
very convenient. And I mean, maybe it's a coincidence. I don't know. But I can't think of any country that establishment, the sort of like Western Israeli CIA democratic establishment, would rather have than war with Iran right now. And so when whatever happened got botched in whatever way it got botched, you start to see what also looks a lot like other botched, like for lack of a better term, deep state operations of the past. And another one I've been looking into is the Vegas one.
There's millions of ways to build your fantasy, but there's only one place to play them, and that's DraftKings Pick 6.
Yes, our favorite fantasy sports app, DraftKings Pick 6, is the newest way to compete against other fantasizers and win cash.
Yeah, I've already won some, Steve.
I know, I've seen you playing while Ian was talking.
DraftKings. Who has time for the stock market when you can double or even triple your money betting on something you love?
Download the app and you get NFL Plus Premium. More on that later, but first the app.
Pick 6 is easy. Pick a player, then choose if they have more or less of a stat, like yards, touchdowns, catches, and more.
This is the fun part. You get your picks right and you win cash.
And it's peer-to-peer against people, not robots or AI. So you gotta be good with your choices.
Prizes are big. They can get real big real fast with minimal entry fee.
And that's not a trick. It just means you're awesome with your picks like me.
You're not that awesome. I mean, come on.
Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use the code Danny Jones. That's code Danny Jones for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Plus 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer expires September 19th. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 888-789-7777 or visit cpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. One per new customer. Reward issued as $50 in non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 6 months. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms. It's linked below. Now back to the show.
Over the last couple of weeks. And it's just, I mean, they're all unique because they're all botched in different ways. They're all different events. But you start to see these patterns of when these things get botched, the cover-ups start to all look the same. And they are marked by things like no cell phone data and things getting confiscated and weird explanations that are like pinned on one shooter that is super, like, you just start to see these replicated patterns in these essentially patsy schemes. That just, they don't make me think I know what happened, but they certainly make me think I don't trust what I'm being told about what happened.
Yeah. My first reaction to the Trump shooting thing was like, if it was the CIA, they wouldn't have missed. Or if it was a really well-planned assassination attempt like Kennedy, like they're not missing.
Well, do you know about how many people did miss in the Kennedy assassination attempt?
I don't.
So everyone has their own theories, right?
John Newman.
He's got a bunch. No, but so I've looked into his stuff.
So John Newman, he's been on this podcast twice. He is the one person that exists that has read all of the declassified JFK files.
Mm-hmm. Which is a lot of documents.
All the books that you read about JFK that have been written about JFK, and even the top JFK scholars will even say this. They'll say all books that exist that are written about the JFK assassination are based off John Newman's books. Yeah. No one actually goes down and reads those sources.
Yeah, because they're all in person, in paper, right? They're all in that one location. Exactly. And you got to go there. But regardless, it's like it wasn't a single shot, right? And it wasn't even just 2 or 3 shots. There was like the bullet that hit the causeway and nicked the dude. There was multiple shots that came in at Kennedy from multiple angles.
It was a triangular fire
right?
team. Yeah.
And but based upon their explanation, their single shooter Patsy, they would have loved to have had one shot hit Kennedy and he's dead, right? And that did not happen. And once that did not happen, and based on the timing, you can kind of see that first shots were fired, but then a few moments go by, and in the Zapruder film, he passes behind the sign. He comes out from behind the sign, and that gives you enough time to realize, like, okay, he's not dead yet. We need to kill him before he leaves the scene, because if he doesn't die, then we're really in big trouble.
Right.
So then shots start getting fired, and that makes their story get completely ruined, because had it been just 1 or 2 shots that got him, that it fits with the explanation of a Patsy, 1 rifle, a couple of shells. And so all of the JFK weirdness comes from the fact that it didn't go off exactly as planned.
Right.
Because had it gone off as planned, we probably would have never even dug into it, never asked any questions, because it would have been very like, one guy, couple shots.
I love the Bill Hicks joke. He's like explaining the whole thing, and he's like, yeah, the Kennedy thing. Where was the shooter? Back there.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so there's all these theories about what really happened, and I don't really...
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter what really happened in a certain way.
Yeah.
Because what matters to me the most is that what happened is clearly not what they told us what happened. And the Kennedy is just a fun one because it's so obvious, because it was so botched. But I think that we often a lot of people overestimate these sort of intelligence agencies and various of groups in our world. 9/11 is another good example of one that there's just enough that went weird and wrong that questions get asked. And this Trump one's kind of has the same pattern in my mind of, they would have loved for that to have happened differently. And I don't know why it didn't happen that way. I don't know who messed up, there is a potential explanation of maybe it was supposed to happen the way it did ish. Like maybe he wasn't supposed to get hit, but that's a lot harder for me to reconcile. I don't know.
Yeah. It seems likely that maybe, somebody in somebody in intelligence, or somebody in the military, or somebody in maybe even like a big corporation with a lot of power, had a bad day or came to this decision, and maybe only like 2 or 3 people knew about it, or maybe less. And somebody had some sort of influence with the Secret Service and was able to leave a building. Like, how do we know? Because, another thing one of my buddies told me was like, we don't know. We don't go back and study all of the different rallies that Trump has done or that these other presidents have done and see how locked down they are, or see how many buildings they leave open. Everyone's only paying attention to this one thing. So we don't know how lackluster their security is on all their other campaign trail speeches. So,
and there's infinite stuff to look into these days. So it's kind of like, how are you going to really collate all that information and data? But I'm of the mind that, and this is kind of what I didn't intend to start looking into this stuff. This is just sort of, I started with what are the most important things to understand? Like, what are the most important questions to ask? And that was what I wanted to make content about. And at first I thought it would be money. I thought it was like, how does money work? Because money controls the world. So I'm going to look into how money works and how companies work and how stocks work and how corporations work. And that led to BlackRock. But that quickly led to intelligence agencies, because I didn't really know anything about intelligence agencies. And I think most people don't. And there's a reason for that. And once you start to learn the history of groups like the CIA, MI6, Mossad, you start to realize that they were founded to conduct what war is today. Like war, ever since the nuke, war has been a very different phenomenon, and it's conducted primarily by covert means. And these days it's conducted by covert means inside of here and inside of our laptops, not exclusively. There are still proxy wars. There's still a lot of stuff going on. But you start to realize that information is not what it seems anymore. And yeah, money's important to understand, but if information is not what it seems, that's almost like a more important base layer to understand, because that means you don't know what's real and what's not. And so then you have to start to get a handle on, so who are these groups and how do they operate and how do they influence information and events and stuff? And basically, like, the layman term for it is the deep state, although that term has been sort of smeared.
Could be just the state or the bureaucracy.
And I think that there's the one side where people think like everyone's in on it. It's a big plan and it's like this group of like men around a shadowy table, which is obviously not the case. And then some people think it's like, oh, it's just capitalism, how it normally works. And it's just the government being the government. It's like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Because I think there's obviously a sweet spot, and anyone that has ever run a business or just tried to do a thing in this world knows that, you know, when you have a goal that you want to achieve, you just look for people that you might be able to either work with to achieve that goal. Like, let's work together. Or you look for people you might be able to sort of use to achieve that goal. Like, I don't really want to tell him my actual plan because he won't, want to go along with it. But he kind of wants this thing. And if I talk to him about he wants that thing, then we can both kind of want, like, there's a lot of ways to peddle influence and a lot of ways to get people to help you do things, especially when you're in a government, especially when you're in a covert intelligence agency. There's a lot of ways to sort of enact a conspiracy or, that doesn't have to let everyone in on everything. That doesn't have to have everyone making decisions or like understanding the big picture, as long as the people at the top that wield enough power are sort of doing their best to sort of generally move things in a direction. And that is exactly why covert intelligence agencies were formed. Is the term plausible deniability is like the whole point, right? In that you don't need the CIA if you're just going to go to war. Like, you can just send the military. They're way better at it. You need the CIA when you need to do something secretly that if it gets caught, it won't come back on you. That's the whole point of a covert intelligence agency. Well, Truman wanted the whole point to be to have like an intelligence briefing. He wanted information. And Dulles and his boys were like, yeah, that's not what we want. Like, they're like, we want to go overthrow governments. And they did, right? And so,
the ultimate point of it, the true reason for the CIA existing is for them to garner secrets from other countries that will help them to enact and shape American policies, to put our
global policies,
to make
right?
our country number one. Yeah.
And so that just inevitably starts to, when you follow that objective with the means that they have, that just inevitably leads to, like, their job is to influence kind of events around the world in covert ways that are hard for us to decipher.
Right.
And I mean, call it the deep state, call it, the Illuminati, call it whatever you want. But that's their job. And they started working with organized crime right from the start. So it's like, what do you think is going to be the result?
They needed money they couldn't get this money from Congress.
Yep. They needed the money. But they also just, like, there's sometimes when they just didn't have the means because they weren't very good at their job at first. The CIA especially. Like, Mossad was pretty good at their job, I think, because they've been doing it for a long time, even before Israel was a state. But CIA was, like, kind of incompetent at first. And a lot of times they were actually going to other organizations like MI6 and Mossad and just buying information from them because they had money but not technique in the early days. And, like, another good example of how sometimes it wasn't, like, during World War II, this is technically before the CIA was formed, but Operation Underworld was when essentially the U.S. government was afraid that Germans were sabotaging the ports, that could access the eastern seaboard because this big boat got blown up and sank in the harbor, despite it kind of like organized crime took credit for it later on. But the government was like, the teams, like the unions and the mob essentially run the ports, and we can't really get a handle on the ports. So why don't we just hire the mob to handle the ports?
Right.
And this is before the CIA was even formed. And they literally just hired the mob and the mafia to protect our ports, which is like, dude, what do the mob and the mafia want more than anything else? Free smuggling all up and down the eastern seaboard. So, from the founding of the CIA, their job was to do covert actions around the world that'll influence global events. And they were teamed up with organized crime from the very start, and corporations, which are, just a different brand of organized crime.
Yeah.
So once all that came together for me, my whole perspective on what my job was shifted. Because before that, it had been like, how do stocks work? How does money work? How does BlackRock work? How does all that, which is important and it's interesting.
Yeah.
But then it shifted to like, all right, let's fucking go down the conspiracy rabbit hole. Because at that point, like, call it what you want, but it's essentially conspiracy theories are now on the table. And a lot of them are made up. A lot of them are bullshit, but a lot of them are very factual. A lot of them are actually just history.
How much involvement do you think BlackRock really has globally with like CIA and intelligence? I mean, some people would argue that BlackRock's too big to be involved in this. They're not maneuverable enough. They're not smaller. They're not like an Apollo Global, for example.
Yeah, you know your shit. And I don't have the answer to this, but I think I've done more research than a lot of the people that are talking about BlackRock conspiracy theories, because BlackRock is like the low-hanging fruit of conspiracy theories. And that's why I blew up on TikTok in the first place. Because I was talking about this sort of basic shit before I really knew anything. And the more I learned about BlackRock, I realized that like, that does not really fly. Like if BlackRock is actually pulling strings behind the scenes, they're the best that's ever done it. They're the most secretive. They leave zero tracks. They like, if they're doing that, like, Larry, good job. But I don't think they are. But they do play a really, really foundationally important role that I think most people just aren't necessarily equipped to understand, in that, yeah, overthrowing governments and doing covert actions and like all the spy shit is very important to, run the world if that's, your goal or whatever. But you still have to have a handle on money and on how commerce works and how finance works and just the global, because that's this sort of beast of its own, right? Capitalism just kind of does its own thing on a global scale. And when you have all these trillions of dollars floating around, you might have the best plans in the world. But if capitalism is incentivized to promote this, green energy agenda, just making shit up, then you are going to have to go with that tidal flow or subvert it. And BlackRock it's not just BlackRock. It's BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, which is basically just owned by BlackRock more or less. But what they do is they manage all of our retirement accounts. They manage all of our sort of latent money that the regular people would hold.
Are you talking, Steve?
Do you think Ian saw my bald spot?
On the money side of it.
You wouldn't hide the hunchback of the Danny Jones podcast if you had Hims hair loss solutions, Steve. It's time you get your confidence back and restore your hair with Hims.
I get so caught up with not wanting an extra product that makes me feel inadequate, but they have so many options. Personalized chewables, oral, spray, serum treatment options. You really can find what works best for you.
Hims makes hair loss treatments simple with clinically proven ingredients like finasteride and medoxanil that can regrow your hair in as little as 3 to 6 months.
The process is simple and 100% online. Just answer a few questions and they'll determine what's right for you. If prescribed, your treatment is sent directly to your door.
Hims has hundreds of thousands of satisfied customers that enjoy their results. So if you feel like you're losing part of yourself with your hair loss, like Steve over there cowering in the corner, get your confidence back with Hims. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/Danny. That's hims.com/Danny for personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/DANNY. Don't be a light shunning troll like Steve. The link's down below. Now back to the show.
They manage all of our sort of latent money that the regular people would hold that power. And most people then get stuck on the money side of it. And they think, well, yeah, but and so they think, oh, BlackRock controls all this money. They control the world. But easily debunked, because they don't. They manage that money for us. It's our money. They don't own the shares technically. Technically, they're holding all these shares on our behalf.
Right.
That's a fair debunk. But it leaves out the piece that it's not about the money, because capitalism is inherently democratic in the sense that every share represents a vote of a company, right? And so all these corporations like Procter & Gamble, that's putting poison in our lotion, like Unilever, that's putting poison in our food, like Johnson & Johnson, that's putting literal asbestos in the baby powder and covering it up for 30 years. Every big corporation in the world, well, in America, let's just keep it to the S&P 500, the stock market here. They are all majority owned by BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, to the point where all those shares represent the voting power, and that voting power chooses who's in charge of those companies. And so when in a real capitalistic free market, we would all be represented in those companies, because we would collectively, through our retirement accounts, through just our regular holdings, through all of our money, which is trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, that would be us sort of collectively having voting power to decide who runs these companies. And so when Johnson & Johnson gets caught with asbestos in the baby powder and covering it up for 30 years, we would have something to say about it. But it's written into all the contracts of all of the ETFs, exchange traded funds, mutual funds, index funds, all these things that BlackRock and Vanguard manage, that they manage the voting rights for the shares. And some people, if you actively submit forms, you can request to represent your own voting rights, but no one does. And so it's this weird scheme where what they have now done, and I don't know if it's on purpose and nefarious, but regardless, it's extremely useful if it's leveraged, is they have cut off our legs in terms of our representation in the entire stock market that would make all of those corporate executives beholden to us, because they have a fiduciary duty. It's legally binding that all of the boards of directors of all these companies, and thus their executives, the CEOs and stuff, they have a fiduciary duty to serve the shareholders in the shareholders' best interest. And in a theoretical world, that would be us. And so it is illegal for them to do, even if it makes more money for the shareholders, if they're poisoning us and we don't want them to do it, and we're all telling them we don't want them to do it, there's another layer of you're legally bound to do what's best for us. But now their fiduciary duty is to BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, technically, because those guys are the actual shareholders. Right. We are just the beneficial owners of an ETF share. And so that means that now all of that fiduciary duty is consolidated into one central spot. And every one of those guys know that they don't lose their job if we get mad. They lose their job if BlackRock or Vanguard or State Street get mad. And so suddenly they are all their interests are aligned to just please a few fund managers. And if you tank a company and absolutely obliterate its value, you sell it for parts, you extract all that wealth, give your buddies a bunch of paychecks, and destroy this whatever company it is, like Toys R Us, who knows, you don't necessarily get punished for that, because if that's what this sort of collective body, this money mind wanted to happen for any reason, you get rewarded with a bonus, with a new job. Because if the guys representing all these shares that work at BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, et cetera, and the banks along with it, if they're pleased with what you did, doesn't matter if it was in the company's best interest, because it was in the shareholders' best interest. So you suddenly, though you sunk that company through apparent mismanagement, you wind up being the CEO of this next big company, and you get all these bonuses, right? And so it inherently cuts the legs off of capitalism in a way that makes the free market not represented in the way that it's run anymore. And that's, I think, fundamental to why we wind up with all these psychopaths that are running all these companies and are completely okay with doing things like putting poison in the food and not really caring if it poisons us, because it makes a lot of money for everyone that's in the club. It sort of creates the club, this corporate club, and it incentivizes them all to do what's best for the club, not for the consumer. And we don't really have any recourse other than getting loud on Twitter now, because our shares are all locked away into these funds. So it's not that they control the world, but they do control this really important capitalistic piece of the world that you would have to have some level of a lid on if you wanted to achieve big things. And it might not be nefarious. It might just be that like they all benefit from it. So it's just evolved to be that way. I don't know. But it's an interesting one, because there's like layers to, oh, it's the biggest conspiracy in the world? Not really. Like, oh, but there's actually a layer where it's really nefarious and evil in ways that directly affect all of us. In a way that like the CIA overthrowing Guatemala doesn't necessarily affect you except for the price of bananas. And I think that's why I blew up on TikTok, is because I started to unpack that and show how, like, because this dude is in charge of this company that makes all your shampoo, it's full of chemicals that are going to make your hair fall out. And if you buy from a family-owned business that's run by someone who, like, a woman who cares about your hair, that hair product is not full of chemicals that make your hair fall out. You should buy from her and support a real person. And like F Procter and Gamble, who's like being sued for literal hair loss in their shampoo products. And then right next door, there's a product from Procter and Gamble to fix hair loss. And so those are things that affect us in real life that we can actually do something about by just changing our buying habits and starting to support small businesses and family-owned businesses. And that's like a whole other side of my content that a lot of people don't see, that I love, because it's kind of more grounded. It's a little less like fun, because it tends to be a lot of researching of just companies, researching who owns things, but it's super useful. I appreciate hearing people like you elucidate the stuff with the stock market and big companies like Procter and Gamble and BlackRock, because I don't understand any of that shit. I'm just not smart enough to comprehend financial institutions and the stock market and Wall Street and all this stuff. But my introduction to this world was when I read this dude. He's got this Substack called True Hoops. Interesting. I've never heard of it.
His name is Steven. Find out his name. He runs the True Hoop Substack. Basically, what he did is he wrote like
Henry Abbott.
He wrote this 25 episode, basically this like long, there's like 25 different articles. It's a series of articles that basically starts at like Apollo Global and the NBA. This guy writes all about the NBA. And he found out about the Apollo Global and Leon Black and all these guys and Buzzy Krongard, and how they're all like came up together, went to school together, and how like Buzzy Krongard was a CIA guy who got on the board of all these companies, was partying with all of them, and Buzzy Krongard happens to also be the guy who was the one who shorted all the American Airlines stocks like a week before 9/11 happened.
Interesting. I don't know about the Buzzy side of it. I've done a little bit in Apollo because it's such a dark, and it's the rabbit hole that never stops giving. And it's such a unique point in history when Wall Street was financializing in a new way. Like tech computers were changing the game, derivatives were changing the game. And I think organized crime was changing the game in a big way. And they just like Apollo is not the only one, but they're at the center of it in a big way. And there's obviously a lot of Jeffrey Epstein connections in there too.
Yeah, tons of Jeffrey Epstein connections and Mohammed bin Salman connections. What's the guy, the arms trafficker, Khashoggi?
Yeah,
Adnan Khashoggi.
Adnan Khashoggi. The uncle, I believe, of that journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, that got chopped up 1 year to the day after the Vegas thing. Jamal Khashoggi gets chopped up. There's a whole interesting Saudi.
You think there's a connection there?
I don't know because it's super weird, but
I don't know anything about the Vegas.
Man, it's such a wild rabbit hole. Let's do it for just a second here.
Let's do it.
Get this whole thing canceled.
Yeah, perfect.
Anyone that doesn't know about it, you should Google Las Vegas shooting map. And there's a Google Maps file that someone has compiled on the internet.
Steve, so you can find it.
I think it's called vegasshootingmap.com. And it's hard to find on Google. It's easier on some of the other search engines like Brave. It's like the third or fourth hit. But it's a compilation on Google Maps that they've made their own file where it's got sources, like the primary sources linked to the map of all the videos that were taken, of autopsy reports, of all the 911 calls in audio format. No, not that. Just Google search for it. You'll know it's like a Google My Maps file. If you look for Las Vegas shooting map, you might have to go to a different search engine too, like
what's the other one?
DuckDuckGo, for example.
Go to DuckDuckGo.
But anyways, it's got all this primary source information on it. And it's a great resource for people that don't know anything about the Vegas shooting because there's way too much for us to cover here. But the building, the structure, this is it. Yeah. So all of these weird dots here, these are all pieces of evidence. They're actual videos. They're police body cams. They are.
Was it Dan Bilzerian there?
Like Dan Bilzerian was there. I talked to him about it, and he's got he actually kind of like redirected me on a different angle that I hadn't really considered. Because there's all these helicopters that are flying around that are not officially there, that don't exist. But the building, the structure on top of the Mandalay Bay Hotel that is not in any of the videos because it's kind of like retracted back from the top. It's actually a different hotel structure that is owned by the Saudi royalty. It's a famous hotel chain, and I forget which one it is, but they like are the majority owners of that company.
A structure on top?
Yeah, so it's just like a penthouse like structure, suites like. Okay. So it's like Mandalay Bay Hotel is this building, but then on top there's like another structure up there that is sort of like, 1 or 2 or 3 floors or something of these like penthouse suites that are owned by a different hotel company. And they're owned by Saudi royalty as like their majority owners. And so a lot of people went down this angle of like Mohammed bin Salman was allegedly there. People say they have video of it. And I don't know for sure, but he was apparently in the hotel's gambling or something. So there's this whole angle that is hard to say one way or the other. But after the Vegas happened, like 1 month later is when Mohammed bin Salman went on the Saudi purge where he arrested like all of these Saudi royalty that he said were corrupt. Yeah. He purged corruption out of the Saudi government. Right. And right before it had been when he had been given the crown, so to speak, over his brother, or not his brother, like one of the other princes, I forget his name, the evil one that's like aligned with all the people. And Khashoggi is obviously aligned with Epstein because Epstein, a lot of people don't know that Epstein's like early days when he went from banking at Bear Stearns, but before he became a trafficker, those like in the 80s, those middle days, he was arms trafficking with Adnan Khashoggi. Right. Adnan Khashoggi was like the person that brought Epstein from being just a banker into the Mossad intelligence aspects. Right. And so Jamal Khashoggi is probably linked in some ways to that. And he used to work for Saudi intelligence. Like he's not just a journalist. Right. And so then 1 year later to the day, he winds up all chopped up. So there's just all these little things that sort of imply the Saudis are involved, not to mention like the crazy fucking firepower that was leveled on civilians and not on civilians. I don't know. Dan had a really great theory that sort of like a lot of the conspiracy theorists theorize that these helicopters are out there having like they're shooting at the civilians and they're shooting at the structure on top, the penthouse or something. And maybe there is like in some of those autopsy reports that people eventually got access to, there are people that were shot directly down through the top of their head.
Really?
Yeah.
So there were helicopters or there were not?
Oh, there were 100% helicopters. Yeah. And people found them on the, like the flight trackers. You can see their transponders, and the helicopters, before the shooting even starts, they fly, 3 of them fly over top of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. They turn off their transponders 15 minutes before the shooting starts. And then their transponders are off until after the shooting is all over, and they turn them back on and like fly away. And then so there's like all these weird and not to mention that the shooting itself, everyone with any military training, Dan included, all say that is a belt-fed machine gun. That is 100% not a bump stock M4.
What?
Yeah, that is 100% not what they say it is, because bump stocks are also famous for malfunctioning. Like a bump stock is like, it uses the recoil of the gun to rechamber the round, and you can just look them up on YouTube. People, like, they're kind of like a gimmick, like and so they will, like, they'll kind of shoot like automatic fire, but inevitably it will jam, especially if you're going to like fire full auto at that kind of rate over and over and over and over.
They said, so the conventional theory on this is official story is one guy. It's
a single shooter that had this whole room just loaded up with guns.
Yep.
And he smashed out the window with this special hammer, and he just unloaded with these like, you know, conventional assault rifles with bump stocks all the way across into this parking lot, which is like a long shot. A bunch of headshots happened.
Where we're looking at this, where's the Mandalay Bay Hotel?
Mandalay Bay is down left. It's where all the yellow dots are down left of the parking lot.
Right there, Steve.
Yeah, right there. That's the Mandalay Bay Hotel.
Oh, okay,
he's on like the 34th floor or something like that. I forget the exact floor. And he's shooting across and diagonal over that parking lot, which is where the festival was.
Got it.
That's the official story. He never left the room. He shot 12 volleys and maybe some like bolt action rifle and stuff. And then he committed suicide alone in the room with no one there. An hour before the police even got to his door, with an arsenal of ammunition and weapons all around him still ready to go. He just was like, I'm bored and I'm tired and I'm out. And he shot himself, allegedly.
Was there any evidence that anyone was in there with him?
Yes, lots. There was so in the hotel records, there was 2 women, 3 women, I think 2, actually like staying with him in that hotel room on the hotel records. But so there's all these inconsistencies. That doesn't make any sense. But and then like they have the photo of him dead, like the crime scene photo, and it's pretty visually obvious that what you are looking at is a dude with a fresh blood, like bullet hole in his head with fresh blood pooling on top of a dried blood stain. It's like clearly 2 different colors of blood happening here.
Oh shit. Right in the forehead?
You don't really see the bullet hole,
right.
but there's also a lot of evidence that the windows were not actually smashed out. Like the photos of the crime scene that show the hammer and the smashed glass that are like, look, he busted the window with his hammer. Yeah. They don't really look like what's on the police body cams that got leaked or released of the cop that entered the room with all the cops. Mm-hmm. So there's all these inconsistencies. But then all around Las Vegas, there's all these 911 calls of people that are saying that they either are seeing people running with guns through these hotels, or they're hearing shots in hotels that are like 3 blocks up the strip, like at the Tropicana. The Bellagio has like 10 different calls in it of people saying that they heard a shot inside the Bellagio, and that there's like people freaking out. There are people that work at the hotels. There's cops that got handed, like an automatic pistol was found on the ground, and a civilian picked it up and was like, this doesn't belong here, and handed it to a police officer like, hey, I found this. There's like all these fucking weird anomalies all over Vegas, like super far away from Mandalay Bay. And it's not necessarily like, some of that might be people that are just freaking out. Some of it might be people that are hearing echoes.
Right.
But a lot of those 911 calls happened like long after the Mandalay Bay shooter had stopped shooting. And they're reporting like, I heard there are 5 shots I just heard in this lobby of this hotel. And when you go through enough of this sourcing, you start to realize like, this is so beyond suspicious in so many ways. And a lot of the conspiracy theorists arrive at this theory that these helicopters were doing the shooting. And that could be true. Dan kind of redirected me. Right? For what? Like, so there's the layer of like, it's to grab our guns. It's to make us scared of guns, like a false flag mass shooting. And that's the only, that doesn't line up with everything. Like it maybe lines up with some of it.
Right.
Like maybe that's why.
How do you fit Ben Salman into that?
Not one bit. And well, that's how do you fit like all of the other if you wanted to do that, you would just have a bunch of people walk into the festival with guns and shoot everybody. Or you would just have just the dudes shooting, and you wouldn't have all this other weird anomalies happening. You wouldn't have helicopters in there. Like, you don't need that to make people scared of guns.
Black helicopters.
Yeah. And so then the conspiracy theorists go to the next layer where they go like the Saudis, and like they came after bin Salman in that penthouse up top, and they were shooting him with these helicopters with machine guns on them. But then that doesn't account for why would they then be shooting up a music festival full of civilians? It's like the explanation is as a distraction to like confuse law enforcement and to just like f everything up. It's like maybe I don't know. But Dan got me on a great point that like that's not like what those helicopters would normally, from a special forces perspective, those helicopters are probably exfiltration, not attack.
Yeah, the atmosphere right now is so complicated and shitty and crazy. And that's why I choose Shopify over my wife.
Like a dating app, Shopify is there whenever you need it, for anything.
Shopify is the global e-commerce platform.
It doesn't matter how small you are or what you sell, Shopify helps you sell at every stage of your business.
Whether you're selling little UFO gadgets like Steve or you're ramping up t-shirt orders like we're doing on the podcast, Shopify helps you sell everywhere.
They have the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better than other commerce platforms.
And their AI-powered Shopify magic makes everything a one-click wonder.
From on-demand printing to accounting to chatbots, it really is a one-stop shop.
Shopify is simply the best and easiest e-commerce platform for a pea-brain like myself. I've personally been using Shopify for years, and I love it because it's so easy a moron like myself can do it. It's super easy to implement discounts and promo codes. You can manage your entire site and inventory right from your phone. You can add multiple users. Uploading or even updating inventory is a breeze. And they have hands down the most helpful customer support of any e-commerce platform I've ever come across.
If you guys don't already have your own e-commerce store,
Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your business in every step of the way. This is their YouTube tutorial channel. They run through everything you need, and they keep posting. I don't know any other company that goes into this much depth. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US and literally millions of entrepreneurs all over the world, from small to huge.
So if you want to help support the show and check out Shopify, you can sign up for our $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/DannyJones, all lowercase. Again, go to shopify.com/DannyJones now to grow your business no matter what state you're in. Shopify.com/DannyJones. It's linked below. Now back to the show.
Like, it's far more likely that helicopters would go in to exfiltrate the Saudi crown prince and get him out of there than to like, you don't like that's like Jason Bourne movie shit. You don't like put a bunch of machine guns on a bunch of helicopters in the middle of downtown Los Angeles and then just go and unload automatic fire all over the city. Like, that's the sloppiest thing you could ever do. And my brain goes to like, if you're unloading an automatic machine gun on the Mandalay Bay in any format, you would have windows smashed all over the place. You'd have broken glass all up and down every floor of that thing. Like, all those rounds either must have gone, because you can hear them, they either must have all gone into the crowd, or they must have all gone maybe like onto the roof of the Mandalay Bay specifically, or Lord knows what. I think that I'm starting to lean towards, and this is by no means concrete, I'm leaning towards maybe there was some sort of firefight on the roof, like someone holed up and like they bring it, like, you know, if it's like a bunker, I could see you then maybe bringing up some machine guns and just like unloading on like a bunker where people are like hiding and trying to keep the crown prince protected inside.
Yeah.
So you essentially have a firefight, a kind of in and out of an armored fortified position.
Yeah.
And then there's like an exfiltration happening with helicopters or something. And then maybe all these other weird sightings are like sort of the supplementary forces like exiting the premises. But that doesn't account for the whole festival shooting that clearly is like. And so I think regardless of what it was more than one thing at once. And I think it's very likely that whatever it was so botched that, and maybe it was botched because it was botched, but maybe it was botched because it was interrupted or like counterattacked or who knows. But regardless, that makes it hard to analyze the signature of what it is. Because, you know, once something goes wrong, like the JFK shooting goes wrong, then suddenly actions don't necessarily align with like the ideal way to do something, because it's actually just a bunch of dudes with guns freaking out and doing their best to get out alive and to like make it work based on their objective and what's going on in this crazy situation. And that makes it really hard as like a journalist to posthumously go in and look at the evidence and say, look, this all makes sense, because inevitably a dude running around with a gun in the middle of a music festival is going to do irrational things. It's hard to like explain it with logic. So I don't know. It's like a total mystery, but it's a mystery that got swept under the rug, got completely shadow banned. A bunch of the people that were there that were speaking out about multiple shooters died afterwards, like quietly just like left the world. Yeah. And then that all gets censored too. And so then it's like hard to tell what's real. So I'm in the process right now of kind of getting access to the journalists that like were primary on it, that were reporting that in like when it was happening, and just kind of unpacking it all, because it's hard to go back and know what to trust, because that's a crazy allegation, right? That these people, like all these witnesses died.
Yeah,
but
dude.
I've heard it from a lot of different people now. And so I'm starting to be like, it's like at least 50% credible, and I've got to corroborate that.
It's weird that this story is super shadow banned everywhere.
Well, it makes sense that it's super shadow banned everywhere, because if it's anything but what they told us, holy Lord, they've got to shadow ban the hell out of it. Because essentially, regardless of what it is, it's basically us getting a direct look into some sort of like the wars that are happening between these covert agencies and these covert groups that kind of really run the world. Like, and whatever it was that happened, if we were to get at that truth, a lot of things would probably unravel. And maybe some of them are still ongoing, because like bin Salman right now is like in the middle of the peace deal in Israel. And like Saudi Arabia right now is critical to the global war and peace structures. Like there's a lot going on that are probably still active.
How did you find this? You just Googled it? 8 Las Vegas witnesses dead within 30 days of attack.
Yeah.
1 month after Las Vegas on October 1st, observers are still looking for a satisfactory answer to the shooting, claiming mainstream media has given up on covering the attacks. Conspiracy theorists believe the public has bought into the lone wolf scenario that claimed 59 lives.
Interesting. It's on a
look
criminal
at
defense side.
So the second paragraph is, these other two paragraphs are critical.
8 key witnesses, can you zoom in a little bit, perished in questionable conditions, according to WUN News. The report says that each of the 8 had something in common besides being present throughout the gunfire. They each knew details of the massacre which contradicted the authorized narrative. 4 of the 7 gave accounts to the media which stated that there was more than one shooter. Others died before they could speak out.
And what most of those allegations were, I believe, is that there were shooters on the ground, actually in the crowd at the festival. And when you look at the pattern of deaths, like on that Google Maps file, the bodies are, a lot of them are in the middle of the festival, but then there's one whole grouping that is like top right. When you're looking at the map, that would be like kind of north. Basically, it's like farther away from the shooter. There's a whole grouping of bodies that was essentially obstructed from view of the shooter outside the festival and behind like kind of the fences of the festival on the other side from him. And so you start to, and a lot of the witnesses say that there were people with guns that came in from the sides into the, and when you look at like, there's a ton of headshots, like clear headshots. You can see in the videos of like the cops in the cell phone videos, you can see a few different instances where the cops are like, damn, that's like a clean headshot. Like, or
really?
Damn, right between the eyes. Yeah. Like they say it verbally while they're looking at
Where
the
are
bodies.
these videos available?
They're in that map. Yeah.
They're in,
they're in that map, and or on YouTube. There's more. And so there's a ton to dig through, because a lot of the cell phone videos are mostly shorter, but a lot of the body cam videos are like 3 hours long, 2 hours long. So it's a lot to sift through. But
what happens when you publish stuff like this on YouTube? Have you tried yet?
On YouTube, I have not. It got flagged on TikTok at first, and then it went back up when I appealed it. It's still live on Instagram. It blew up on X. So
really,
it seems to be working. And I didn't go. I think I'm reasonably good these days at walking this line between like presenting the evidence that will get you in trouble. Is like, if you don't present too much, you just present enough that really gets people thinking and shows them clearly there's more to this than you've been told. But I'm not going to like break any new whistleblower testimony. I'm not going to like, leak documents that are going to newly incriminate people. And so it's this fine line where I think that I learned it from TikTok, because TikTok is so censor happy, that if you walk it right, you can usually get like the information that's already out there reframed in a way that, because a lot of times it's not framed in a way where you can digest it all at once. A lot of times you have to like ingest all this conspiracy theory literature or all these documents, read all these reports. And I'm reasonably good at taking all of that and putting it into like a 6-second video that's already all out there.
Yes.
But now I've gotten it in a story that put the pieces together where it's like, oh, I kind of get why this matters now.
You do a great job of consolidating all the most interesting points of a story and putting it in there and showing, like you show the graphics, you show the websites, and then you even do like, when I watched your one about the shooter, you're like, just type in these 3 words. I'm not going to say what they are.
Yeah. Yeah, because
that can be like the catalyst for somebody to like fall down one of these rabbit holes.
And that's such an important part. And it's part of what I do that I don't really like tell people as much. But the point is not just to get information out there. The point is to change our culture around information and to inspire accurate sourcing of information and inspire people to do their own research. Because the way I look at the world today, we used to live in a centralized media model where in order to get information out, you had to own a printing press, you had to own a news agency, you had to own a TV channel, whatever it was. That's all centralized. And we don't have any power to decide what we get shown. And so the CIA can run Operation Mockingbird and control all the news.
Right.
But now we've got the decentralized information space that is amazing in so many ways, but it comes with a lot of its own problems, right? And a lot of the problems of this decentralized like Twitter information space is misinformation, is how like people can like make a story about how like Kanye West is dead, and whether it's true or not, it can just run. Like shit can just, and so the key thing is that we all need to evolve our way of consuming information, even as regular people, not like the journalists, not the podcasters, like all of us regular folks. Everyone needs to understand that now the onus is on you. It's the locus of control is internal now, because you're getting all the data feed of all the information. And a lot of it's made up, a lot of it's fake, a lot of it's bullshit, a lot of it's propaganda that's paid for. A lot of it is actually the CIA or Mossad running information campaigns in your Twitter feeds. And so you have to go to the sources and find them yourself. And you have to find the journalists that show their sources, because if you're not showing your sources, it's just your opinion. And that's, I picked that up. I had really good teachers when I was young. Like that is just straight out of my middle school, like history class, is primary sources are gold. And if you don't have primary sources, you better have secondary sources. And regardless of what your sources are, you better be able to show them, because if you can't, how would I ever believe you, right? And so I purposefully include like the URLs in my videos, the pages I'm drawing from, because sometimes like with the Vegas stuff, for example, we don't know what the fuck happened. And like, who knows how valid your sources are, but I can just show that like, this is a primary source. This is just a video from that day, or here's a phone call from that day, or here's an article that was written about it. And so it just lets people understand where the conclusions are coming from and draw their own conclusions, instead of what sort of maybe like the first generation of influencers, or a lot of people still do, where they just sort of tell you what to think without letting you have the actual sources of information. And I think that's one of the most important things I do that sort of is beneath the surface, but I'm hoping it sort of like,
that's I talk about this. This is something I think about a lot too, especially with like the media landscape. I mean, you just laid it out beautifully, but like the majority of the media that you see on social media, on YouTube, even on the television, is just like the JFK books, right? There's maybe one guy who witnessed it in person, who read the sources, and then there's this fucking million-mile layer of people regurgitating it and regurgitating it and regurgitating it. And it's just like this game of telephone. And people, a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this too, have these podcasts, right? And I can sit in here and talk on the mic about in the Las Vegas, about JFK, about the Middle East, about Israel. I've never been there. I don't know what it's like to live there. I don't know what those people live like. And like, I can have an opinion on it. That's pretty fucking crazy that I can have an opinion on it, and people will listen to it and be like, oh, I think he's onto something. I think I'll adopt that opinion for myself. It's so fucking weird, man.
And it's powerful in some ways, but it's powerful for good and for bad. And I think what you're describing is exactly it. And we don't see it anywhere more clearly than on Twitter right now, because X is now monetized in a pretty big way. And so I'm getting like, $3,000 a month or whatever to post content. And I know every time a big story breaks, I know that if I just hit retweet, if I see a big story and it's like posted 3 minutes ago and the news has just broken, regardless if it's true or not, like Joe Biden has a health scare in Las Vegas, he's dead, which we're still not totally clear if that was like solid reporting by Laura Loomer or not. Seems like it probably was. the health scare, not necessarily the dead part.
Right.
Although there's a funny rabbit hole there.
That is a funny one.
But like if I find that story when it breaks right away 5 minutes ago, and I repost that as quickly as possible with the catchiest phrase possible, I can make money off that, and I will.
Off a retweet?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Well, if I quote tweet it.
Quote tweet it. Got it.
I got to quote tweet it.
Interesting.
Yeah, because then it's a post of mine and I'm getting views off of that. And actually really interesting breakdown by my boy Penny that the payment is actually for ads in your feed. It's not for people just looking at your post.
Right.
So there's all this other stuff. But that's the inherent incentive system on X right now. And so everyone is incentivized to break the most shocking story first and as quickly as possible.
Yes.
And you don't have to be the first one. You just have to be in that wave of the first big accounts that break it. And then everyone will draw into yours and you'll get 5 million views. And that adds up. And that's how you get paid. And that's super dangerous. It's dangerous for the sanctity of information, but it's also dangerous for the credibility of a journalist. And I think people are starting to really realize this, that you have to be really careful. And I'm guilty of this too. I'm not perfect by any means. You have to be careful about what you are willing to sort of speed jump on, because if you start jumping on stories when they first break, a lot of times they're just literally made up. And sometimes they're just misinterpretations of the facts. Or jumping to a conclusion that's logical, but in this, for example, the plane that went down in Brazil the other day, a week ago or whatever, tragically, I tweeted wonder who made that plane,
right?
Because I assumed it was probably Boeing, but I also I had worded it in some way that was directly condemning Boeing for it.
Right.
I was maybe I shouldn't go that hard. I mean, in hindsight, what I should have done is just looked it up,
right,
and done that research for myself and taken those 10 minutes.
But it's cool. Somebody can post a link right below it and a comment that corrects it, and then you can amplify them or retweet their comment.
Exactly. So that's the media literacy thing that I think we all need to get better at. Is and that's on all of us to learn to source information better, to learn to go to the comment section and double check things better, to learn to not believe things when you just see it, and to learn that we are incentivized, influencers, people in my position are incentivized to report the most sensational stuff as quickly as possible, at least on X. It's a little different in other platforms, but inherently that temporality of news incentivizes being fast, and speed and accuracy are inherently diametrically opposed often.
How much do you think, and I don't know how much you've thought about it, but how involved do you believe various intelligence agencies are in behind the scenes in social media?
Oh, I think about it a lot. And I think it is massively, I think it's huge, way bigger than most people think.
I think the Twitter files really kind of exploded this thing.
Yeah, there was that version of it where before Elon bought X, I don't think anyone had realized it. But if you start to go through our history from MySpace till today, we had never, because the Twitter files showed us that the government was actively asking all of the social media companies, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, X, Google, all of them, just hey, censor this information. Hey, delete these accounts.
Right.
Hey, push this down. And for the most part, they were all complying. And what that means is there was never a time until Elon bought X that we ever had free speech on any of our social platforms of any size, right? Except for maybe some of Reddit at some time, but Reddit is highly controlled now. Right. And 4chan, which is hell, the dumpster behind Wednesday's. It's cool, but whatever. So I think that people had thought that we were operating in this everyone can share their own stuff now, and we have this flow of information, but no one realized that free speech is not the same as everyone has a social media account and can post, but there's a lot of censorship and all this other stuff going on. And so the Twitter files exposed that we had been living in this fake sort of version of Web 3.0 or Web 2.0, I guess. And now it's really interesting to analyze how much the news landscape has changed just since we've had one big social platform where there's at least mostly free speech. And there's obviously still some censorship on X, and it's kind of, it's controversial. But what has happened is that X is so fast at reporting information. And I realized this on producing my YouTube show, that I was trying to do kind of weekly, what's happening this week mixed with more evergreen, big picture stuff that relates to it. And I was realizing that more and more, normally my thing is to look up articles and to look up sources and news and shit. And I was realizing that actually X is a better source for basically everything now, because all those articles are posted to X. But beyond that, stuff is breaking on X, like hours, days even before it gets published in the news. And so the news is starting to source X. Everyone is starting to source X. And so that's one difference where now the information is coming up out of the collective group, like the collective consciousness, so to speak, our collective hive mind. That's where the reporting is coming out of now. That's the fastest. And now like reporters are all there and they're all being sourced from there. But there's this other piece where now the things that we weren't allowed to talk about, that we didn't even realize we weren't allowed to talk about, like the most obvious one is Israel and Gaza and AIPAC and just all that other, like this whole hornet's nest of stuff.
Yeah.
Is suddenly like, holy shit, no one even realized how much we weren't allowed to talk about any of that, because everyone that would talk about it would get deplatformed and debanked and like shadow banned to hell and like accused of weird shit and like sent to an insane asylum or whatever it was, like depending on who you're looking at. So it's changed the sort of like where information comes from, but it's also done this crazy thing where it's changed our perception of what even like free speech means. Because free speech is one thing when we're here in our room having a conversation between the two of us, and that's vitally important, obviously. But free speech is a whole different thing when it's the public town square connected like millions of people all together.
Right.
That's like a different beast that even the founding fathers could have never anticipated, the type of power that has. And so, to get back to your original question, yeah, the intelligence agencies, like it is actually the CIA's primary official job to control those narratives. Because think about it. Their job is to protect our country, right? And if you wanted to overthrow America, you would not do it with a military attack. That would be the dumbest thing you could ever do. Like, we're the most powerful military in the world. You would subvert America. And the most obvious ways to subvert America are culturally, intellectually, like genetically / reproductively. Like there's all these other ways to subvert America, and they in many ways all rely on subverting our information flow. And so the CIA's mandate is to protect us from that. And the only way you protect our free speech information flow, because the nature of free speech is that we can all say whatever we want, we can share whatever we want. So that means that China can share whatever they want into there, as long as they just kind of blend right in. Same with Russia, same with Iran, same with Israel. And so the only way to protect our free speech is to control that whole space, theoretically, which is not possible. But like, if Russia could overthrow us by feeding us the narrative that like communism is great, then the only way to counter that is to feed us the narrative that capitalism is great, in a simplified way, right? And so if Israel's narrative of like Palestinians are terrorists and Israel is always right is being fed in from this side, the only way to counter this like upswell, like, you know what I mean, is like now any narrative that comes in that could be a threat to whoever's in power, whoever wants whatever, and the CIA technically is like, you know, protecting America. Yeah. So whatever threat could come into that, their job is to counter that threat. But the only way to counter it is to feed a narrative in, right?
Yeah. No, I see that.
It's their official job.
So you think it's just like this shadow war between intelligence agencies going on behind the scenes of these social media companies? Yeah. I wonder how much. I had this guy on here a couple weeks ago, John Kiriakou, who was he was a whistleblower against the torture program for the CIA. He was like he worked for the CIA for like 20 something years, and then they eventually put him in prison for blowing the whistle on the torture stuff.
Classic.
And he dealt with the Mossad a lot during his career, and he told me that at one point he learned that Israel or the Mossad has like over 200. There's a difference when you have an agent in a country, right? Like we have CIA, it's in Israel, and Israel has Mossad, that's here. But there's a difference between declared and undeclared officers. Yeah. He said they have over 200 undeclared officers in the U.S.
Oh, I bet it's
so why?
Infinitely more than that.
This was like in the 90s.
Yeah. So, huge rabbit hole here. But Israel has always had an insane amount of spies in the U.S. and has been subverting the U.S. ever since they were founded. And that's everything from like they literally stole nuclear weapons from us and built a secret nuclear facility that John F. Kennedy was trying to audit and shut down, by the way. They did that with like some of the most famous like technological leaks of all time, all the way up to like Jonathan Pollard, the Promise software scandal, right up to 9/11. A lot of people don't know that before 9/11, there's this whole document called the Israeli Art Students DEA files. You ever heard about those? So you can find them on the internet. If you search like things like DEA files Israeli art students.
Can you look that up, Steve?
You can probably find it. And it's a report written by the DEA. And what was happening is in 2000 and 2001, there is like all these government agencies were reporting. Yeah, all of those are it. And what they were doing is they like at first no one realized what was happening because there was these like people walking into like the DEA office in like whatever in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
And they were saying like, hi, I'm an art student from Israel representing this university and I would like to sell you some art. Are you interested in looking at any art? Is there anyone I can show this art to? It's like, why the fuck are you in the DEA's office? Like, or any other government building? Like they were just going to all these government buildings posing as Israeli art students trying to sell art. And as they started to report it up the chain realized that this was happening all across America.
It says Tampa.
Yeah.
An
All
incident
across
report
America.
of DEA Tampa has revealed much information related to these individuals. DEA agents in Tampa District Office questioned the team leader of a group of 9 individuals at length. The team leader stated that he purchases the paintings for $8 to $10 from an individual in Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, Florida area. What the
That's
fuck?
all a cover story, though. That's all just made up bullshit. Okay. And so the thing about this document is it's actually super lengthy, and it's really hard to get to the bottom of what it is if you don't read the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But what it is it's all across America in 2000 and 2001, the Mossad was running a massive surveillance campaign on all of our government buildings. And this was their cover, was Israeli art students. And they were using it to gain access to the buildings and then to surveil the buildings, to write down blueprints. A lot of these people were actually ex like Israeli intelligence that had backgrounds in explosive experts, in surveillance technology and wiring, just things that like go into that building. And
were they wiring these paintings and trying to sell them to them?
I don't think so. No, maybe it's hard to say. Like we don't know entirely because a lot of them, like once they started to get caught, they would change their stories around a lot. Some of them got stopped and interviewed a lot. But they never really could act on it a whole lot. Oh, WikiSpooks is a whole rabbit hole.
WikiSpooks?
Do you know about WikiSpooks?
No.
Oh, you're gonna love it, dude.
Oh
WikiSpooks is Wikipedia for fucking tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, and it is the coolest resource. And it's a link. Just like you would think. The best one to start on is 9/11 WikiSpooks because it's the most like complete.
Oh,
it's
no,
not,
I clicked on that.
It doesn't have everything. And it's certainly
9/11 Israel did it.
Yeah. So you have to obviously double check everything that's on WikiSpooks thoroughly.
No.
But it is a really fun resource to get you going because it's like nothing's held back. It's all there and it's all linked and it's not all true, but it is actually a really cool, it's just so much fun. But
it's the opposite of Wikipedia basically. It's
exactly, because Wikipedia is all controlled.
They hold back all the fun stuff where if you're on WikiSpooks, you're like, hold on, you're going the other direction now. You're like, hold on, you guys are going way too far with this.
And you wind up somewhere in the middle. Yeah. But anyways, the Israeli art students is just an obvious example of like massive Mossad spying on the US. And it's like the Mossad has this other unique angle that is kind of hard to talk about because the CIA has to recruit members, right? They have to recruit and then send you out, or at the very best, like you already have this, you've got this tech company and they can approach you and be like, yo, you want to like work together for whatever reason, but you have to have an incentive that'll make a person want to work with the CIA. And then you also have to worry, like if you're going up to this Russian businessman and trying to get him to like work for the CIA, you have to also worry that he's actually going to play you and actually be working for KGB or something like that. There's all these complicated things you have to consider if you're going to run intelligence ops. Mm-hmm. But Mossad has this other angle where they represent the Jewish state and they represent the only hope for the Jewish people, like by sort of the Israeli narrative, right? And so Jews all around the world have this inherent like trained religious incentive to support Israel. And so it's a difficult thing to talk about because it's easy for it to sound like you're saying all Jews are in on some global conspiracy, which is not what I'm saying.
Right.
What I'm saying,
Jews.
Right, it's the Jews. What I'm saying is that Jews are inherently incentivized to help Israel out, unless you don't support Israel. And there are lots of Jews that don't support Israel.
There's tons of them who don't support Israel.
Badass guys, you're saving the world. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Stand up for those guys. They need our support. But that's just my bias.
There's a huge difference between people that are Jewish and Netanyahu and his war hawks.
Yeah, Zionists and all that. But all you need to do is find, one of them, like Leslie Wexner, like, Leon Black, like whatever. And so not all Zionists even are Jewish, but they have this pool of Zionists around the world that when the Mossad approaches a Zionist, there is way more incentive for that person to work with Mossad than if CIA was approaching some random person. Right. And because of the nature of Judaism is dispersed across countries and cultures. Judaism is not local to a region. It's not local to a country. Right. Judaism is already decentralized. And so the Mossad has this angle that leads to the like, notice how many people are Jewish, which is like, yeah, that is kind of racist, but like there is an angle where you have to consider it because the mafia is all run by Italians for a reason, right? Organized crime has always been organized around blood because blood is the strongest tie that binds. Blood is the number one thing you can trust. And if you're going to run organized crime or an intelligence agency, you damn well better be able to trust everybody. Because if one guy gets caught and he rats you out, you're fucked. And when someone gets caught, they're very incentivized to rat you out because they could be looking at life in prison or a sweetheart deal where they disappear on an island and they're totally fine. They just have to rat you out. So you need this like incentive to keep everyone together. And that's why organized crime has always been organized around races and religions because that's the best you can get. And it works really well. And historically in America, the two most powerful were the mafia, Italian, and the mob, Jewish. And so when you're like investigating the Italian mafia and you walk into a business and everyone in there is Italian, is it racist to be like, okay, this might be a mafia establishment, right? And so in the exact same way, when you're investigating Jeffrey Epstein and you're like, okay, every single person in this network is Jewish. And he's like clearly working with Ehud Barak, the ex-prime minister of Israel. And he's clear, like Les Wexner is one of the most influential, like globalist Zionist Jews in the world and like everything about Jeffrey Epstein's network is Jewish through and through and through and through and through. And that's part of why we know he was Mossad. But then you start to think about, so how did that network get built? And when you research it, like for example, if you read Whitney Webb's book, you realize that a lot of times that is actually just, someone approaching someone and being like, hey, both of our interests are aligned around Israel. Let's work together and found the mega corporation, or let's work together and found, the Wexner Heritage Foundation or whatever. And that will promote like global Judaism and the policies of Israel. But shoehorned into a lot of those things are these other sort of like things that look a lot like Mossad operations and tactics, and the mega group is a really good example of one where like ostensibly it's just a bunch of very wealthy Jewish like billionaires working together to like for the betterment of Israel, but all of them are like tied to organized crime like Leslie Wexner, Jeffrey Epstein, Lauder family, you name it. And so the Mossad has this weird other angle where they have this like cultural, racial, religious angle with which to approach people. And again, remember, they don't necessarily have to approach someone and be like, hey, we want you to be a spy, or hey, we want you to subvert your country on behalf of Israel. They might just approach someone and be like, hey, you love Israel, right? We have this project and we could really use your support helping Israel. They don't even have to identify themselves as Mossad.
My buddy John, the ex-CIA guy, was in here the other day, and he was telling the story on how they tried to recruit him.
You mean John Perkins?
John Kiriakou.
Oh, word.
The former CIA guy. He was he's Greek. His last name's Kiriakou. So he had a meeting with these guys. They were talking with these Mossad guys in a building that was maybe a mile away from Langley. And after the meeting, the Mossad guy goes to John and goes, Kiriakou, you are Jewish?
Exactly.
And he goes, I am not recruitable. How dare you try to recruit me a mile from Langley?
Bingo. Because they know what's going on. People in that industry know how that works. That's how it's always worked.
Yeah. Well,
that's just the nature of the game.
It is. And everyone will tell you that the Mossad is much more capable than the CIA, and they're much more efficient than the CIA because they have existential threats, and they've been through a lot. In World War II, we in America, we don't have that. We kind of live in like a fantasy world.
Yeah. 100%.
Where there's really not one thing that unifies us all.
Not since the communism, not since the USSR failed. And the Cold War fell apart. And then we replaced it with the war on terror. But my contention would be that we didn't come up with the war on terror. Israel came up with the war on terror. Have you ever thought about that kind of like angle there and the clean break report and 9/11 and just sort of the outcome of 9/11 benefited Israel in every imaginable way? And it didn't benefit any of the nations where the actual terrorists were allegedly from.
It benefited a lot of people.
Yeah, it benefited a lot of rich people.
It didn't just benefit Israel.
That's very true.
Of course they benefited.
100% true.
Of course they wanted us over there, right?
Yeah, they've always wanted those sort of like neighboring Arab and Islamic nations destabilized for many reasons. And so, a lot of rich people in America benefited from the war on terror, but
Halliburton.
but you and me, like, we don't benefit from thinking of all Arab people as terrorists. But Israel very directly benefits from Americans collectively seeing Arab people as terrorists. And there's no better example than that than since October 7th, they have this sort of like jump on Arabs are, if Americans are predisposed to think that Arabs are terrorists and then October 7th happens, think how much easier regardless of who's right and regardless of what side you're personally on, like if we're all predisposed to see the Arab side as the terrorist side, then it's like, obviously that's making it a lot easier for Israel to argue their case in an October 7th style of event. So,
yeah.
And it's not that like, it's not just like, oh, Israel runs it's, Israel is not even just one thing. There's everyone in that government is their own people. There's a lot of evil people. There's some good people. Like who knows, everything is complicated. I think that people always want to reduce things to just like singular bad guys, singular evils, simple explanations. Like the world is so complex. Yeah. You can see patterns, you can kind of see the shape of things.
Yeah. The crazy thing is how much influence they have over the elections and over the presidents. They give both presidents so much money. I think Donald Trump just got $100 million from the Adelsons, right?
Yeah. They always play both sides. Right?
And yeah, it's just hard to know. It's hard to know what's real anymore, dude. Like
you want to go down a crazy rabbit hole on that?
Like Donald Trump, he's the one who was responsible for moving the embassy to Jerusalem, right? So he is like very much
Trump supporters
in
really don't.
He's very much in lockstep with Israel.
Yeah. And I think the extreme, like the hardcore Trump crowd is actually, and this is like the hardcore Trump and then the Q crowd, they are on the like bandwagon of he's actually playing them. Like he's actually like kind of strongmanning them and he's like going along just enough, but he's actually not like.
Well, historically, he's said things in the media like, I don't know if he wants to make a deal. There's one side, I won't say who it is, but there's one side that definitely doesn't want to make a deal.
Yeah. And I can see there's some parts where like his body language in some of his interactions with BB over the last year or two have made me be like, that is like kind of dominant body language. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of denial about how aligned he is with a lot of those interests and a lot of that money and has been for a long time in his life.
Well, what is he saying publicly about it right now? He's basically, I saw
publicly right now, he's like the most pro-Zionist Israel thing you could ever, he's like talking like we will deport pro-Palestinian protesters. Like it's the most atrocious, from my perspective, it's the most atrocious, like if you were a Trump supporter, so me personally, I would be a Kennedy supporter 100% if he was not super Zionist. And that leads me to all these concerns about blackmail and all these other things.
Right. And it's to support him is just to take votes away from Trump.
It is at that point.
Although, why hasn't he dropped out yet?
So did you see actually just today, Shanahan on the Impact Theory podcast just announced that they are considering joining the Trump campaign? It's a big break.
I can't believe this happened weeks ago.
Well, they've been considering it for a long time, but they just haven't been public about it. I'm surprised they're actually talking about it now. Okay, I guess the DNC has started. I was expecting them to wait until after the DNC to see if the Democrats had another weird curveball coming, so then they could throw the curveball. I don't know.
Right.
My understanding is that Bobby is considering going with Trump and that Nicole is considering doing other things that I will let her talk about. I don't know what she's necessarily said publicly. I just saw some clips before I got in here. But yeah, I think that a lot of people on Trump's side want to ignore the amount of Israeli money he takes and Israeli influence he has. And that's always been their play, is to have as much money flowing to as many of those pockets as possible so you just control everyone. No better example than Congress and AIPAC. I actually went into the Senate is an easier one because there's only 100 senators. And when you look at all 100 senators today, 93 of them took AIPAC money on the road to winning their seat. And
yeah, you were showing this on your Twitter. You were showing like their website where it shows like this many votes won, this much money contributed. Like they're bragging about it openly.
And and a lot of people think it's like the more money they pay, the more influence that. Not really. It's like they just need to win the seat, right? And so in an easy race, maybe they only need to contribute a little bit. Maybe in a really hard race, like they need to put in millions and millions of dollars to defeat someone. But then it turns out of those other 7, like 3 of them are actually Zionists anyways. They just didn't need any help winning, so they didn't give them any money. So it's like that's like our entire Congress is bought by AIPAC, which is just absurd. And just another funny JFK coincidence is that JFK had literally sent the paperwork to AIPAC, well, the precursor to AIPAC, for them to register under FARA the month before he got shot. And then the month after he gets shot, Israel sends back a letter that says, this is cool and all, but we don't think we qualify. We're not going to sign. We're not going to register. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if so. You think the AIPAC had something to do with Kennedy or Israel?
I think Israel certainly had a lot to do with Kennedy.
Really?
Yeah.
How so? I don't think AIPAC. I don't think there's
not AIPAC.
AIPAC
Just
didn't become
Israel
powerful until the 80s.
Just the Zionists in general, just the Zionist cause. Like, this is during the most important time in Israel's history. Israel has just been founded, and they have just started stealing they have just stolen nuclear material from the United States, from NUMEC, and they are building nuclear bombs. And from the Israeli perspective, they're a new state that was literally founded by organized crime, along with Rothschild banking money, along with a bunch of paramilitary groups that were later classified as terrorist groups because what they did was so atrocious. That's how they founded it. And so they were in this really precarious place where it was not a far stretch for things to turn on them and the international community to be like, this is so messed up, guys, you got to stop, or for like an Arab war to break out and them to lose. And so their success was in no way guaranteed at that point. And they had realized, like probably from the very start, that if we had nukes, our survival is pretty much guaranteed. And we got to get nukes. And so they, within the Zionist circles, they started talking about that. We don't know for sure, but it seems as though they've been talking about that for quite some time. And they started this NUMEC operation, and they got nuclear material and started building the Dimona nuclear facility out in the desert. And Kennedy was extremely vocal about wanting to go there and inspect it and shut down any nuclear program that they had.
Where was this?
In Dimona. It was
Where's that?
It's in the deserts in Israel.
Okay.
I'm certainly not a geography guy.
Right.
But yeah, it's just kind of like middle of nowhere desert. And it was funded largely by the Rothschilds, along with this really famous like Jewish Zionist like actor, celebrity actually, that just had a lot of ties to organized crime in America. So again, it was basically funded by the Rothschilds banking money, organized crime collectively raising a bunch of money in America. And France actually did a deal with them that gave them like a bunch of the technology to build the reactors and stuff, because France wanted something in Africa and Israel. It's kind of complicated. But so they had just essentially acquired the ability to build nukes, and they were building nukes, and Kennedy was like trying to shut it down. And that is essentially, at that point in Israel's history, that is an existential threat to the entire existence of their state, because not only would they lose their nukes if he had succeeded, but that then becomes condemnable, right? Then you've just been caught stealing nuclear technology and doing secret nuclear proliferation. So you don't just like go back to square one. You then might actually, that might be an existential threat to your nation as well, because then the international community could turn on you. So that is circumstantial, right? That is just sort of like the motive. But there's also a lot of Zionist ties to a lot of the people that sort of like the organized crime elements. And I'm not saying it was all Israel by any means. I'm just saying that there are fingerprints of Israel, and there's a lot of motive and means. And LBJ, who came in afterwards, was rather friendly with Israel. I don't know if there's any smoking gun in any way. And I think that I've seen people sort of like present the story as though they have a smoking gun. And I'm not so sure. I've not vetted that stuff for myself. I don't know. But I highly suspect that they had a hand to play, because clearly it was more than one party. It was at least some CIA assets involved, some kind of mafia, mob, like organized crime assets involved. LBJ was probably involved. So yeah, there's a lot that was going on behind the scenes and leading up to in the years and the months and weeks before the JFK thing. And there was clearly, according to John Newman, a lot of coordination between CIA and FBI. Not just because, well, one of the main reasons was because there was a two-time communist defector on the route in Dealey Plaza that had been a week before he was shot. They took off the flash stop on his FBI file. So there was a guy named Giesling, John Giesling, who was an FBI agent who was in charge of tracking all of Oswald's activities in New Orleans. Yeah. And there was this thing called a flash stop on his file. So meaning that essentially when this thing's on your file and you're on, and there's a president speaking in public and you're anywhere near that, that's like, he equates it to being a flea at a Lysol convention.
He's like, there's no way you're going to be there.
Yeah.
And a week before, the FBI removes the flash stop from his file.
Yeah.
And so, and then when it comes to the CIA, there was another lady that he actually interviewed, which I think is probably the biggest smoking gun that the CIA was involved with. This lady named Jane Roman, who was a CIA officer, and she was a liaison to the Mexico City desk when he was in Mexico City. And Mexico City called up CIA. They're like, yo, there's this guy who's trying to defect. What's the deal with this guy or whatever? And they were like, oh, we don't know. We don't have any new information on him since 62. In 62, he was still in the Soviet Union. And Jane Roman, who was the CIA officer who signed off on this thing saying we didn't know anything about 62, she also signed off on another document claiming that there was a flash stop on him 2 weeks before he was shot. So when John went and met up with her, he's like, Jane, you have some fucking explaining to do here. And he says she smiled at him. This was like right before she died. She goes, it's indicative of something that was being held very close to the belt about Oswald that was only on a need-to-know basis. Yeah. So if the Mossad or if Israel was somehow involved in this, they would have to been working directly with the FBI and the CIA and the military, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who didn't want Kennedy there because they wanted a nuclear apocalypse. They wanted to nuke China and Russia. And Kennedy in 61 was like, no, you guys aren't doing this. And then he started talking to him behind the scenes.
Well, in some ways, Mossad has been working with CIA from the start. Like Angleton has been like, they tied that shit together early on. But to clarify, I'm not saying like Mossad assets were necessarily on the ground in any way that day. What I'm saying is that Israeli interests were heavily aligned with the operation. And there's a lot of evidence that they used some mafia mob assets in the operation. And mafia and mob at that point were basically all one thing, like Jacob Rubenstein. The mob basically took over the mafia long before that. Like Meyer Lansky is famous for creating the National Crime Syndicate, Murder Inc. evolved out of that. And that was when the mob and the mafia basically decided like, all right, we should probably work together. It'll be better, right? So it's now the Jewish mob and the Italian mafia. And certainly there was still a lot of Italian power bases in there, and they controlled a lot of that. But like the way I kind of look at it in the short form is one of them got a country. Like one of them literally founded a country, Israel. And the other one is sort of like relegated to obscurity now in Hollywood movies. And, you know, they're active in Sicily. And I mean, they're still active in the United States too. But the mob took over an immense amount of power there. And I think that we all call them the mafia all the time. And we think of them as like the Italian mob mafia. But like the Jewish mobsters had a lot of power. And Jacob Rubenstein was a Jewish mob asset.
To be completely honest, I had no idea the difference between the mob and the mafia.
Dude, it's such a wild rabbit hole because no one does.
Yeah.
Think about how many movies you've ever seen about Jewish mobsters. But we've seen hundreds of movies about the
Italians,
mafia.
Yeah.
They're all about the Italian mafia and a few about the Irish mafias.
Right.
And then you realize that, and this is where it's like, I'm not saying all Jewish people are in on some conspiracy. I'm just saying that like there are natural incentives structures out there. And it only takes a few people to kind of like roll with some incentive structures. And Hollywood was very literally founded by a bunch of Jewish film producers that were being ostracized from the New York film spaces. Because at the time, back in like the 1900s, the center of film was in New York. And they were all like, no, Jews can't fucking work here. We don't want you here. Like, go away. And so all these Jewish film producers that wanted to make movies, they were like, well, okay, we'll just go found our own place. And they moved to California and founded Hollywood. And that's all, it's like all over Wikipedia. It's not secret history. That's not in any way controversial. LA to this day has the highest percentage of Jewish population of anywhere in the United States. Because it was this safe haven all of a sudden for Jewish people because Hollywood was founded by them. And so they naturally they have always been a major presence in Hollywood. And so it could just be a coincidence, but it's like glaringly obvious when you think about how many movies have been made about the Jewish mob and how many have been made about the Italian mafia. And most people don't realize that the Jewish mob had at least as much power as the mafia, if not more. Like Meyer Lansky is the one that is famous for having photos of J. Edgar Hoover going fellatio on his boy. And so Meyer Lansky was the one that allegedly had control over the FBI to keep the FBI on a leash during that whole 3-decade time period when organized crime went from a couple of street gangs to an international crime syndicate that's running liquor everywhere, and then that turns into drugs and prostitution, everything else. So it's like they held so much power throughout that. And then they literally like organized crime in America, the Jewish mob, they just sold a whole bunch of extra weapons and ammunitions and everything from World War II to all the people that were busy founding Israel. So like the organized crime, the Jewish mob in America was absolutely instrumental to the founding of Israel, because you can't found a country through war if you don't have weapons, right? The Haganah and Irgun and the Stern Gang, they were all armed by the Jewish mob.
How much influence do you think, how much dirt you think they got on Trump? How do you think that any blackmail?
Oh, it's such a good question.
Because he's the one guy, like you can, like there's a lot of names in the book, right? He's the one guy who has fucking footage dancing around with him and a bunch of hot girls at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, but that's all they've got. So here, the way I look at it is kind of like,
no one else has got that good, that kind of footage with Epstein, like hanging out with him, partying with him.
Exactly. But a lot of other people have footage of them doing things with kids.
But no one's seen that shit.
Exactly. And the amount of scrutiny that Trump has come under, unless like the whole DNC, like there's a lot of evidence that, well, how should I phrase that? I think we should start at the beginning, actually, at Trump's beginning. Because a lot of people don't know Trump's history. Trump was mentored by Roy Cohn, who was instrumental in that blackmail campaign we were just talking about with Meyer Lansky and the mob blackmailing J. Edgar Hoover way back in the 40s and 50s.
Remind me who Roy Cohn was?
So Roy Cohn was a big part of the McCarthy era, and he was this lawyer that was, he was famous for being a big part of like the Red Scare and everything. And he was this lawyer back then. And he was like good friends with all of these different people, Hoover included. And he was involved in the Blue Suite parties where J. Edgar Hoover was famous for allegedly like cross-dressing, and they had these like gay where everyone would cross-dress in this mansion, in this suite at the Plaza Hotel that was full of cameras. That's how J. Edgar Hoover amassed what was allegedly one of the largest blackmail collections in all of history at the time anyways. And so Roy Cohn was there at the founding of this video blackmail era when Meyer Lansky and the mob and Rosenstein were all pioneering it and blackmailing Hoover, the director of the FBI. Roy Cohn went on to do a lot of shady stuff, but among them was to be one of Trump's most close mentors when Trump was young, coming up. And so Trump was friends with Epstein. He was like mentored by Roy Cohn. He swam in all those powerful circles. And then he later, so the Plaza Hotel, this hotel where they had these Blue Suite parties, where they had this whole suite wired up with cameras designed to blackmail people. Trump later overextended himself financially to buy that hotel specifically, which is kind of weird, right? He also later bought the boat of Adnan Khashoggi, the weapons smuggler that we were talking about earlier, right?
Yes.
And that boat was allegedly, that was famous for people who said that boat was wired up with cameras because Adnan Khashoggi was a huge proponent of, he was very fond of sexual blackmail.
Yes.
And he would ply his clients by bidding them onto his boat and then just giving them girls and drugs and whatever they wanted. Like, you're the star, you get whatever you want. That was how he would like close deals. But
Trump was going to like his birthday parties and shit on the boat.
Bingo. So Trump has all the makings of someone that understands that game. And then I cross-reference that with the fact that Trump does not drink or do drugs, and he never has, right? And he from an early age, he was friends with the guys that were blackmailing people. So I actually think it's far more likely that Trump played the game from their side.
He does love pussy.
He does. But when you look at his taste, I mean, he said some weird shit about young girls before, like, so that gives me pause. But like his wife Melania is not like, it's not like he's remarrying like 20-year-olds all the time.
Right.
Like some people. And so I actually think that based upon how much scrutiny he's been under and how much like they tried to shoot him. They like investigated him over this made up Russia bullshit, this like PP tape that didn't really, like, maybe a girl on him, I don't know. Like, that, it's hard for me to believe that no blackmail material from Epstein ever came out during all of that. Like, they have all of Epstein's blackmail material. They've got tapes of Bill Clinton doing Lord knows what with all, like, the fucking president of the United States, Bill Clinton, was one of the most famous clients, and he was like the client for a long time. He was like, there are indications and allegations that, like, in some ways the entire operation may have been spun up specifically to target Bill Clinton. And then it's just like, let's do this a lot more too. But I lean towards, I don't know, and it could be either way, and maybe Trump is blackmailed, but it almost seems more likely that he was a blackmailer than that he was a blackmailee. As in, he bought the hotel and the boat where they were recording blackmail, and he's trained by the blackmailers. And he's always been kind of his own guy. And he somehow had enough power to break into the political sphere and totally fuck their shit up in 2016 in a way that like no one has ever been able to do, right? That's weird.
Yeah.
And in a world where everyone is like kind of controlled in all these various ways through money and blackmail and favors and whatever it is, it's weird that he's able to just break in and just totally ruin that whole scheme. And to me, that indicates that he's at least probably not blackmailed. But maybe he even has some blackmail on some people. That would start to explain what we see in terms of how he just does his own thing in some ways and like kind of doesn't give a fuck about how things have always been done.
Well, then why would he be bowing to Israel?
Well, that's a good question. Maybe he has some level of like, not necessarily like direct allegiance and alliance, but you know, when you know how like when you kind of grow up in the same industry as people, even though you sort of disagree on some things over time and you've had some like spats in the past, you still kind of have this respect for them. You still kind of like, you know, we kind of work together. We've been through a lot. And like, I got my interest and you've got yours. And to a certain point, I'll work with you. But at a certain point, like, that's a line and I won't cross that. Right. That's just how humans work, right? So I could see it being something like that. And I'm not saying I know that. I'm not saying, I'm not even saying I believe that for sure. I'm just saying that right now, based upon my understanding, that seems more likely than him being blackmailed. Or maybe it's a bit of both, right? Because a lot of blackmailers have been blackmailed and have blackmail on other people. Because in a certain way, that's just inherent to the game, right?
Yeah. It's like deterrence.
Yeah. And usually it's because you've also been doing illegal shit together. And Trump has clearly done some illegal shit with lots of people over his years in various forms. Although I would argue that maybe falsifying business records like was not really an important one, but who knows?
Didn't Clinton's Wikipedia just get scrubbed?
Yeah.
Literally last month.
Did you see what I made about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a little bit more to it, but it was so weird I was filming a documentary about this whole thing. And then I pull up Bill Clinton's Wikipedia page because I'm trying to figure out how many times he flew on the plane or visited the island. And every mention of Jeffrey Epstein is suddenly gone from his Wikipedia page. So I went to the Wayback Machine, which is like it archives websites. And you know this, but they might not. And so it archives the history of websites. And I start going backwards in time. And it turns out that just like a month or like last month, suddenly all like 30 something references to Jeffrey Epstein got taken off. And what actually wound up happening is I went and looked up the editor that had edited the page and what they did. Oh,
you can see the editor.
Yeah. So Wikipedia is interesting because you can actually track every edit that's ever been made and you can track who edited it. And then you can look at what other edits they've done. And it was really interesting dig. He's like, and that's where it's like, I found a super editor where every day, all he's doing is editing. That's like, and it's all on these certain pages, like a bunch on Cale Starner, or however you pronounce the PM of the British guy, a bunch on, like he did some on Diddy's page. And most of them are kind of like unimportant, just kind of like, but the Bill Clinton one, what they did is they made a separate page called Bill Clinton's Connections to Jeffrey Epstein or whatever. And they moved all of the references over onto that page. So it's like, look, we didn't delete it. We just moved it over. We separated it because it's more organized. It's better, right? But then it's like, okay, so why the isn't there a link to that page on Bill Clinton's page? Because like, let's rewind for a sec. Like, let's hold the fucking phone because no one ever stops for enough time to realize that we like stop and think. The United States of America's president from 1992 till 2000, that is 8 years, the president of the United States of America was actively blackmailed, sexually blackmailed by a foreign nation. And their spy, Jeffrey Epstein, was visiting the White House with women like 17 times or something officially. And then he's flying to this island and probably kids on camera, like, sorry, you're gonna have to do a lot of censoring here.
It's all good.
But like, that's the president of the United States of America. And he was overseeing some of the most important like peace talks and like the Oslo Accords were massively important. And that was when the Oslo Accords, that's like the most recent sort of like, it was when Yasser Arafat and whoever was it might have been Bibi actually, whoever was in charge of Israel at the time, like peace talks to sort of determine the path forwards for the West Bank and Gaza and the settlements and the borders. It's like that was a critical time for Israel's negotiations for what's going to happen going forwards. Right? That's the most famous photo, like, you know, the last 20 years in terms of that. Right. And Bill Clinton oversaw that.
Right. I remember this.
And Monica Lewinsky
You got me in so much trouble with this one.
Dude,
I had my 2 CIA guys in here debating, and I brought up the Monica Lewinsky conspiracy, and they were like, Jesus Christ, Danny, you've been watching too much internet.
Yeah.
You've been spending too much time on X with Ian Carroll.
All I'm saying is that this guy is actively blackmailed by an Israeli sexual blackmail ring. And suddenly we have a leak that, and so the leak was that this Jewish woman has this sexual relationship with him. But then it turns out that actually there were allegations. I forget the exact words. I was
Just because she was Jewish doesn't mean she was
it does
fucking
not.
Mossad.
It certainly does not. It's just a coincidence that as he's like, so imagine if you are Jeffrey Epstein, right? Your goal is to have all this information hanging over Bill Clinton's head so you can leverage him. That's the whole point of a sexual blackmail operation. And so if he's doing something that you don't like, or if something important is coming up and he's not going the way you want, how do you control him? You either think it through. You have to leak something. You have to show him that you mean business, right? Because otherwise your whole blackmail operation means nothing. If you don't actually force him to do what you want him to do when he's not going to do what you want him to do,
right,
you aren't blackmailing him. You have no power over him. And so if Bill Clinton is not going the way you want with the Oslo Accords or whatever it is, what we would see as the public is we would see a partial release of something that is partial sexual blackmail, like the Monica Lewinsky scandal. That's exactly the kind of thing. Because it's not a career-ending thing. It's not the kind of thing that is going to totally blow the whole presidency up. But it's enough to be because he knows what else they have, right? And it turns out that there was 30 hours of phone sex tapes that allegedly someone had that didn't get released or something.
With him and Monica?
Yeah, exactly. And so essentially there's this woman just happens to have all this recorded, and there's this whole scandal, and Whitney Webb goes into it in her book in a really good way. But basically then it turned out that oh no, maybe someone had bugged the White House, Jeffrey. And so it's wait, these things all overlap where if Jeffrey Epstein was sexually blackmailing Bill Clinton, that's the exact kind of thing you would leak to sort of fire a warning shot over his bow. And it's not so bad that it's going to end his career.
Is the idea that this has something to do with Pollard?
Pollard was also during that time, is they were trying to pressure Bill Clinton to pardon Jonathan Pollard,
right?
And he ended up not doing it.
You found something. This is the Times of Israel. Netanyahu said to have offered Lewinsky tapes for Pollard.
Bingo.
What is the Times of Israel? Is that a legit website?
Yeah, it's literally a Zionist. It's one of the best websites for me to reference.
Zoom in a little bit.
It's like a Zionist Jewish publication from Israel.
Go up. New critical book on Clinton family claims that Israel tapped the White House phones, blackmailed the president with recordings. Okay, scroll down. Israel attempted to tape former U.S. President Bill Clinton the steamy conversations with intern Monica Lewinsky to leverage the release of Jonathan Pollard. A new book on the Clintons family's political enterprises has claimed. In the book titled Clinton Inc. Oh God, is the author still alive?
Probably not.
The audacious rebuilding of a political machine. Author Daniel Halper relies on the record interviews with former officials together with a close analysis of documents termed the Monica Files to paint a salacious and uncomplimentary picture of one of the most prominent political families in the U.S. Hundreds of pages of documents compiled as contingency on the use to use in the former intern, if the former intern ever was involved in legal actions against Clinton.
Holy crap. Why did I never hear of
Keep
this?
scrolling down. Go to the...
You know why you never heard about it?
I can't believe this is in the Times of Israel.
Well, that's the thing. Here's the thing.
Why would this be in the Times of Israel?
Because American media is so controlled because so we can't talk about Jeffrey Epstein. We can't talk about Israel. We can't talk about any of that shit. But Jewish media is not, because Israel is busy bragging to their own citizens about how many, Hamas terrorists they killed. They're busy bragging to their citizens about how many Jewish politicians that we've got and how much influence they've got. The Times of Israel is great at reporting how much Jewish influence is in American politics. And one of my favorite articles that I've ever found on there is them bragging about Hunter Biden's new wife. It's very
on the Times of Israel.
Yeah. So you can find it. It's Times of Israel, Hunter Biden, new wife tattoo.
Where does the Times of Israel rank? If you were going to compare it to a U.S. Media outlet.
I don't know if I'm necessarily informed enough to really say for sure, but it would be like a Washington Post or a New York Times or an NBC, CNN. Yeah, it's like a mainstream journal. It's like the mainstream publication over there, very much so. It's like Haaretz, Times of Israel, Jerusalem Post.
Okay.
the big ones.
Interesting.
So Times of Israel,
Go back to that article, Steve.
yeah, feel free to go back.
I want to see the bottom of it.
Because that's what I'm saying is like, it sounds like, oh, that's just like a conspiracy. You're just drawing things together. But like, no, that is exactly what we would see if there was a blackmail operation going on. And we know what country was running a blackmail operation.
Copies of Halper's book were sent out in a PDF form to hundreds of reporters days before the book's official release was by a previously unknown individual in what Halper suggests was an effort to reduce the impact of the book's release.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that there's an argument to be made.
Go to the homepage of this website.
Israel publishing this kind of, and it's not like, this is not the state of Israel. This is a journalistic publication.
Right.
These are journalists. But there's an argument to be made that bragging about how much influence Israel has over the U.S., even in that form, is positive in Israel. Like in Israel, they, like most of them believe they're not using enough force on civilians in Palestine. Most of them believe that it is okay to Palestinian prisoners because how evil Palestinians are.
Yeah, but this is like the most unpopular thing in Israel by far, right? Like Netanyahu's like the most unpopular.
Well, he was before the
prime
war.
minister. Yeah,
he was before October 7th.
Even more so now, or what?
No, way less. That rallied the whole country together. They were like about to have a civil war. They were about to try to overthrow him before. And then it was like, we are threatened, and the existential nature of that, like that is like ingrained in the Jewish identity, and not for no reason. Like they have been through so much as a people. And so the moment there's that threat, it's like, we are all unified. And I mean, they're not necessarily all unified, but it really changed the dynamic. And now he's got I mean, they didn't even hold elections. Like he's essentially a wartime president.
Trump, never been a more dangerous time since the Holocaust to be a Jew, to be Jewish in the U.S.
This is the Jewish Times, so it's like it's a
Times
sect
of Israel.
of the time. Yeah, it's a sect of this.
Yeah, it's a great publication, and so it's a great one that I like to reference because it's easy to get smeared. And now these days, I'm not even really scared of getting smeared anymore because we all are seeing how common the smear tactics are, but like referencing it in their own words is really useful because they talk openly in these words, right?
That's fucking crazy. And now everyone, if you turn on Fox or anything, it's all like, when we're counting down the minutes and hours until they're going to lob missiles back, Iran's going to lob missiles right back into Israel, and it's going to be World War III.
Let's go.
And we need to start, the U.S. needs to pony up, and we need to start a war with Iran right now.
Yeah. It blows my mind that we're actually sitting in a situation where like all of the, like my parents' generation, like the kind of boomer generation, the older Gen X generations, they were us during the Iraq War. They were like the cogent 30-year-old, 40-year-old adults that understood the world. And the smart ones, at least theoretically, saw through the Iraq War propaganda, or were old enough that they could have and should have, right? And even if they didn't, they are in a position where they should have learned from it by 2005, 6, 7. Like they should have realized like, wow, you literally lied us into a war in the Middle East about fake WMDs that didn't exist. All that was made up. Like, and now we're about to get lied into World War III essentially on a very similar sort of, and it's not the same at all, but like taken into it on a similar amount of like propaganda and sort of like they're a threat to everyone kind of. It's like, wow, how is this even like?
It's interesting how Iran's playing their hand.
It is really interesting.
Like they're holding back. I heard a interesting theory on this somewhere. I don't remember where, but someone was basically explaining it to where the way that this whole geopolitical mess is organized, China and Russia are like becoming closer to Iran, and China and Russia could be like, look, if you guys play it cool and don't start fucking lobbing bombs and starting a war, we can really use you to make the West look like the unhinged maniacs.
I think that's where we're at. I think like, and it's weird to say, but I think we're in a world where the Western nations, call them the globalists, call them the Zionists, call them the cabal, whatever you want to call them, like the Illuminati, I don't know. Those power interests that are sort of like, NATO and the World Economic Forum, I'm just kind of like bringing conspiracy theories all together, the Zionists, the American establishment, the state, they're all kind of aligned in this sort of like Western front. But then you've got the BRICS nations,
Yes.
and Russia is big on standing up to that. And when you actually listen to Putin's speeches in his own words, he very clearly lays out that that's his take, is just like, that is an empire trying to take over the world. And we don't want to, like, what, and I'm just saying what Putin says, you know, believe him or don't, because he is Putin, like he is a KGB lifelong agent and all. But what he says is,
You listen to his interviews, like translated?
yeah. I mean, not like all of them by any means. I'm not like, I don't have, 30 hours in a day, but I've listened to a fair number of them. And there was one really interesting one that is, I'm not gonna be able to remember the name because it's a Russian name, Vladis, oh God, I forget. Where, and he said this more than once, but essentially what he tends to say is like, the West is an empire that is doing evil, woke bullshit, to paraphrase. And he claims that Russia is not trying to expand. We're not trying, like, we don't want more territory. We have so much territory. We could never even use all our own territory. We just want to not be, we just want the world to stay multipolar. We don't want to live in a world that is unipolar, that is ruled by a singular, woke as army of this empire. And so he describes their resistance as sort of existential to the fate of the world. And that would align with his alliance with China and his alliance with Iran, and basically with anyone else that will oppose the West. Not because he like wants the new Soviet Union to be, maybe he does, maybe he's
on
lying.
defense.
Yeah, he's just trying to like, and
He tried to join NATO, like when Bill Clinton was president.
The people do not realize, it blows my mind how people just swallowed the Ukraine line without realizing that, like, A, the 2014 coup was a CIA coup, and then B, like, we were doing what the West has always done, which is like poke until the bear kind of like defends itself, and then be like, see, the bear started this war. And it's always been how it is. And it's how NATO was approaching. It's also how kind of like the aggression was happening. And that's not even to mention all the weird connections that I'm not really familiar with about Ukraine and the biolabs and the Biden family.
Yeah.
And I don't even know.
Did you see
stuff.
Lindsey Graham came out and he's like, we got $10 trillion worth of minerals in Ukraine that we can't let Russia give to China.
I did not see that.
We got 10, I think it was 10 trillion. We got $10 trillion worth of valuable minerals that if we let that go to Russia, they're going to share it with China. We can't let that happen.
You do a good Lindsey Graham voice.
God, dude. Yeah, his
They'll try
southern erotic accent.
Yeah, like any propaganda that they can try, they'll try it. Like the only hope for democracy, like, bro.
He's just given up. I admire Lindsey Graham for basically telling it, like he's saying the quiet part out loud now, at least.
Yeah, it's like.
And everyone's like, Lindsey, shut the up.
Yeah,
Lindsey, it's about lesbian basketball players, not about minerals.
Democracy.
Lindsey Graham just gave up. Tim Dillon put it the best. He's like, Lindsey Graham, he's had enough. He's taking his skin suit off and dropping it at the dry cleaners for the last time. He's gonna let everybody know what's going on. He's going right back to the center of the earth.
Yep. So I realized the other day that I should stop calling myself a journalist and start calling myself a comedian.
Yes.
Because A, that
People
way
won't take you as seriously.
Exactly. And B, it's like the real world is such a joke these days that's why all the best journalists are the comedians.
Yes.
Because like, what's the difference between telling it like it is and making a joke when this is the world you're trying to report on? It's like,
yes.
And at least that way it's like, it kind of just puts that protection layer of like, I'm not trying to tell you I know everything. I'm just trying to like figure out what's going on and make some jokes about it. Cause God, it's so depressing if you let it be. And there's this whole other layer that we haven't talked about of just sort of like the spiritual side of, we're all still just people and we're all still living our regular lives and we've got families and like what's happening in Ukraine. Sure, it will affect the global geopolitical stuff, but like also, whether you go work out today and whether you eat healthy food and like whether you treat people with respect and like whether you go and ask that girl on a date, like those are things that will affect our lives like way more. And I think that too many people get sucked into this like information war, this like Twitter space of like politics without remembering that like, just chill out and put the phone down and like go lift some weights or like go on a hike or like go do something good for yourself and right.
Yeah, totally, man. It's easy to get lost in the sauce with the social media shit and all the news stories.
Fortunately, I love to do it because I sort of like, there's nothing I enjoy more than learning. And that's just always been how I am. And so I sort of have this like, I have infinite job security because there will always be corruption in this world to look into. It looks like there'll just be more and more every year.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, but I love your Patreon. Is that your Patreon tiers for people that join your Patreon?
Yeah, it's my locals channel. No, I guess
okay.
that was my YouTube's like subscriber tiers when I posted that.
Okay, the members.
What was it? It was like
CIA watch list or FBI watch list, Mossad hit list.
Clinton kill list. I haven't actually checked yet if they rejected it or not. I was a little nervous submitting it, but like I don't think they're gonna let me call it the Clinton kill list. But
that is
worth a
amazing.
shot.
I love that.
Yeah, first I was gonna do like tinfoil hat, tinfoil bodysuit, like aluminum, like aircraft grade aluminum spaceship, but like something I forget the list. The Clinton hit list came to me, and I was like, "Oh, I bet we could roll with that."
That's perfect. We labeled our Patreon tiers are based on the levels of Scientology.
Hey, there we go.
Scientology is based right down the street from here.
Really?
Yeah.
What?
The flag building is like 10 minutes down the street. That's where it all started.
Interesting.
Where L. Ron Hubbard parked his ship, bro.
Dude, I should go take a visit before I go.
Yeah, you can do a whole deep dive.
That's interesting. Yeah,
they're walking around the whole downtown area too. They walk around down there. It's like a ghost town.
Interesting.
Yeah, the David Miscavige, he bought up like there's like this whole downtown Clearwater area, and he bought up all like the real estate right on the road. So it could be like this flourishing downtown business area. Instead, he bought them all, and they're like vacant. It's super strange.
That is weird. I haven't done the whole rabbit hole on Scientology or on Mormonism or on, but like there's a few of these religions that are like religions. I mean, Mormonism is more of a religion than Scientology for sure. Right. But like they have these kind of interesting, and Scientology is the most obvious one where it's like, do you have a take on it? Like, is it CIA? Is it like a cult? Is it something more nefarious? Is it actually just like some dude trying to make money off a Ponzi scheme? Like, what the is going on with Scientology?
Yeah, no, I think it's insane. I think it's insane that the guy hasn't been arrested or it hasn't been shut down. I think that is crazy.
Which to me indicates that maybe there's more going on there.
Because there's lots of stories about people being held prisoner against their will, like slavery and shit. Like maybe these are all, I mean, what's the chance that all these stories are fake?
Very low.
Right.
And I think the other thing people don't realize is that, and because it's been hidden for a long time, is that is a way more prevalent thing in this world than anyone wants to admit. And Epstein kind of cracked it open so people could talk about it. But like there is a global satanic religion that does operate aspects of cults around the world. Whether you think that like Hillary Clinton is literally in it or not is a whole different like level of conspiracy. But like
a global satanic religion?
Oh yeah, dude. Have you gone down the satanic ritual abuse rabbit hole? It is so dark. So what I'm referring to specifically are survivors giving survivor testimony on video, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. Like not like one guy came forward and said this. Like there are whole support networks for these people. Like there are psychologists that specialize in satanic SRA victims, satanic ritual abuse, and because you have to like treat them in a whole different way than a regular abuse victim because the level of depravity and disgusting, like literal children, like literally. So, your episode is so screwed now, but there's one in particular that this guy was on the Alondra Markman podcast, and I wish I could remember his name, and we don't even want to pull it up because it's so dark. And everyone should, watch it for themselves and judge it for themselves in terms of whether you think he's telling the truth or not. But personally, it's like you can look into his life, and this guy, like his whole life is based around him recovering from this essentially story of his childhood and abuse, and it looks far more likely that he's telling mostly the truth than entirely lies to me. And what he alleges in this interview that aired like a year ago or so, a little less, on Alondra Markman's podcast, is that he was born into a satanic family, of which there are many around the world, and that he was groomed from an early age to essentially be a Jeffrey Epstein type of character in a global satanic cult that is not all satanic, but the Satanists are a part of this sort of bigger network of crime and everything. And he alleges that he was...
I'm curious how they define themselves, Satanists. Like, what is the definition of a Satanist to them?
My understanding is that some of them, based on what he said, is that some of them are literally worshiping Satan, and some of them are practicing these things in this cult format and structure. And when I tell you what he's alleging, you'll realize that are so like in the same way that like some Jews are really practicing Jewish people, and some Jewish people are. And I don't mean to say, I'm not trying to make that connection. I'm just saying that we were just talking about Jews. Some people are more practicing of a religion than others, but you might still go to church and you might still, you might identify as Christian, but you're not as Christian as the next guy. But he alleges that he was groomed from an early age, tortured every day as a child. It's like abused every day as a child, to be groomed to have multiple personalities. And then by the time he was like a preteen, he was engaging in child death matches where he would be put in a cage and he would fight to the death with another child in like downtown New York in underground like parties that rich people and businessmen would attend. And then that and it sounds so insane, but when you watch it, it's like hard, and it's not like he's the only one that has claimed this. He's just one that put it all in a particularly, like, lots of people have lots of claims about this kind of shit. And he also claims that then after that, he was being groomed to be an actor, and he froze up in his acting interview. And so he got shifted from the acting pathway, because these guys, like, there's a load of money in this community, allegedly, as in, it's tied into all of the global sex trafficking networks, because how do you think that global sex trafficking sort of gets all the handlers and gets all of the sort of like operatives that run it, is you need people that were abused in order to run these things, because you need to be that kind of broken, like you need to be groomed to be able to run this without breaking it all.
Is this all like tied into like the Franklin scandal?
Similar, yeah. So he claims he met Jeffrey Epstein on 2 occasions. He claims that he was being groomed to essentially be a handler similar to Jeffrey Epstein. And he had a really lucid description that Jeffrey Epstein was an insanely good code switcher, is what made Jeffrey unique, that he could be completely normal businessman, like banker guy right now, and then like literally turn the other way and be an absolute depraved, abusive monster, and then like right back on like the drop of a pin. And that's what made him so unique in this guy's perspective. And he kind of like had his programming, his like trauma did not work correctly. And so rather than going that route, he became a breeder. And he alleges that he was sent to a compound in Mexico where he would breed with trafficked girls all day, every single day, for like 2 or 3 years. And they would just breed and breed and breed and breed. And he alleges that that is because they were particularly interested in him because of his bloodline and his heritage as some sort of direct descendant of King Solomon, is what he says. And it's like,
who's this dude? What's this dude's name again?
I don't remember his name. I remember that he was on the Alondra Markman podcast, and she is a survivor of satanic ritual abuse as well.
Is she Anik Lucas?
Yes, Annika Lucas.
Annika Lucas.
Okay, so
this is what.
Okay, so Alondra Markman is his name, and Annika Lucas is her name. She's the one hosting the podcast, and that's
he's the guy.
podcast.
He's the descendant of who?
So what he says in there is that they were interested in him because he has something like 97% Ashkenazi Jewish heritage or something like that, and is allegedly a direct descendant of King Solomon's bloodline. He doesn't say whether he knows that's true or not or anything. He just says that he was under the impression that was why he got selected for the breeding program specifically. And
does he have any proof of this?
Not really, no. And so that's why I say like you should, and first, you should not watch it if you are at all sensitive in any way. And you should only watch it when you are of like a sound heart and ready to like hear some of the most dark and up things you've ever heard in your life. Obviously you can't tell for sure from it. But that's where I start to like look at the Finders cult, look at the Nexium cult, look at Jeffrey Epstein, look at
the Nexium thing's
crazy dude. Who's the the guy that ran Virgin Mobile or whatever it was, Virgin Galactic?
Richard Branson?
Richard Branson. There's a lot of darker people than just Jeffrey Epstein that have been caught. Am I confusing Branson with the other guy? Who was the billionaire that owned all the islands that was on camera talking about how he like wanted to breed with the black women because they had such good genetics?
I don't know.
Oh man, I forget. I think that's who it was.
You think Richard Branson, he owned Virgin. He owns Virgin Airlines, Virgin Mobile.
I could be confusing him though with one of the other old white-haired tech billionaires. But there's just like...
Sounds on par though.
Yeah, there's a lot of just... There's starting to be more and more and more overwhelming evidence that Satanism... I mean, hey, let's rewind. Anton LaVey, do you know who that is?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So like we know that Satanism is a religion. Like we know that it does exist.
It's a ridiculous religion. Yeah. It's not based on anything. It's was like, it's been fabricated.
I would argue you're probably correct in some ways, but also it's
and at the end of the day, it's religious. Like you're fucking, like that's not what it means. Like that's not what Satan really was according to Christians or according to Catholics or according to any ancient texts.
Yeah. In the same way that like these days, a lot of religious institutions are actually just people kind of perverting concepts and using them to manipulate people to do things.
Right.
I would argue that is textbook what Homeboy is alleging in that interview is like, and it's the same thing with like any religious institution is like, yeah, there's like the belief, the word of God, the actual spiritual structure of a religion that I think is super valuable for humans to have, super valuable for us to have. But then there's the side of like, okay, now let's institutionalize it and control it and like give it back to you in this new way.
When Christianity came about and the church solidified itself in society in like the 400s, that's when we went to the dark ages. And that's when creativity, art, intellectual shit, science got squashed.
Well, in Western Europe it did.
Yeah.
But if I'm not mistaken, that is when like over in the East and in the Islamic world, like shit was just starting to thrive. There's a little bit of like I think a global dark age around the Black Plague, and I'm no historian by any means, but I think we often get our history skewed to like in Europe, we were not doing good.
Right.
But that's just one little part of the world. And it is the part where the Christianity was currently being
and the church is synonymous with abusing children.
In a lot of ways. Dude, I just went down this rabbit hole in a big way
so Satanism,
about the Catholic Church.
Right. Yeah. So it's funny to me that Satanism, because the word Satan means to be the opposite. It means to be, that's what it means, the opposite of Christianity or the opponent of Zeus, right? The guy who tried to wipe out humanity. And the church, the fucking church fathers that are running these churches and benefiting from all their preaching and making a living from it are the ones that are abusing kids. So how is Satanism, which is the opposite of this, tied to abusing children? It's like they recreated some new thing and like tied it to the word Satan in like the new world. Like it's a new definition.
That's a good point. That's a good take. I would argue it's really important in that context to distinguish between the institution of the church that is tied to abusing kids versus like the actual beliefs of the Christian people as written in the Bible and as communicated to them by Jesus. Because obviously, like I would argue that Jesus broke away from the Jews, right? That before Jesus, and I am no religious historian, this is just my current understanding, which is very lackluster. But what I understand is that Judaism was doing its thing. And then Jesus came along and was like, yo, this religion has been corrupted by, I forget the name that they've got for them, the Philistines, I think is what they call them. And it's written in there. And he's like, these guys are corrupt and they believe these things that aren't like the real word of God. And actually we should love all people, love your neighbor. And that sort of is like where Christianity split off of Judaism. And like Jesus was preaching these other tenets that as far as I can tell were mostly like more towards like all love, all want, like treat every, like, you know, poverty, whatever. Whereas Judaism has a lot of stuff kind of written into it that are like weird laws that have to do with like who has rights and who doesn't and who does what. And Judaism has a lot of like Jewish people are different than everyone else. And we don't have the same laws and treatment as everyone else, which is kind of, I have some problems with, but I also don't understand it all. But then like, so Jesus, like he was different enough than Judaism that they wanted to A, kill him, and B, like it turned into this whole other religion that then spawned the Abrahamic, like, and then Abraham was another prophet. So Judaism, then Christianity, then Islam is the sort of lineage of those religions. And Judaism being the oldest one, but what Christianity being tied to abusing children is really just a scandal of the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Of like, you know, the last 500 years or so.
Yeah.
And the story of that coming out is fascinating, and it's tied into sort of the Catholic Church almost going under financially speaking, as a lot of the like kind of the Napoleonic Wars were going on and all this. It's super interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And
we were talking about this yesterday.
Do you know about the cardinal that got hung under the bridge as like a message? No. They hired the mafia to hang this dude that had been like the financial manager of the Vatican. I haven't gone deep enough. I didn't take notes or anything. I was just listening to a podcast and kind of getting the cursory details. So it's not all in here. But yeah, he was the
Maybe
financial.
Steve can find it.
Yeah, it's like the famous. It was in the 70s or the 80s or something. It was like more recent, and he had been involved in all these scandals where the Vatican had been misusing their money, and they kind of got caught, and they had to pay all this money. And what it looks like happened is they got the mafia to put a hit out on him, and they hung him from a bridge to send a message of like, you f***ed up.
What was he doing?
He was
Stealing?
doing like fraudulent money stuff with the Vatican Bank, just like investing in dangerous ways with people that were kind of fraudsters and
Right.
Are you talking about
Banco Ambrosio, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, his name was like Carti or Cordi. It was like a short C name, I think.
Here, this is what pulled up. Banco Ambrosio.
Yeah, it was
Banco
Calvi.
Ambrosiano?
Boom, Calvi.
Calvi.
Yeah.
Roberto Calvi.
Yeah, look up Roberto Calvi and go to his Wikipedia page and it'll tell you, or like Roberto Calvi hangs or hanging or whatever. I'm pretty sure he's the one that got hung from this bridge, his death.
Italian banker dubbed God's banker. I love that.
It's a whole rabbit hole. It's super interesting. And
native to Milan, chairman to a Banco Ambrosiano, which collapsed.
He died in 82. And he had sort of like just kind of cleared it all and was basically fleeing, I think. And then he kind of got caught and hung.
5 people were acquitted in Rome in 2007 in a conspiracy to murder Calvi.
Yeah.
Popular suspicion has linked his death to allegedly corrupt officials at the Vatican Bank.
Yeah. It's super interesting. So you want to know this, and this started to open my brain up to this whole other like kind of coincidence. Like, okay, in America, organized crime is the Italian mafia and the Jewish mob. And the two biggest religions in the world, the three, are Judaism and Christianity, Catholic. So and like most conspiracy theories are like Israel Jewish conspiracy theories or Catholic Church, Vatican conspiracy theories that go along with like the Knights Templar. And it's like these two lineages of conspiracy theories. And I'm not saying I believe them all. I'm just saying they are there. And
there's also a lot of good conspiracy about the Nazis.
Yeah, well, they represented the Catholics.
Like,
they worked with the Vatican Bank,
Vatican,
right?
Yep.
And so when you start to trace those two religious beliefs forwards into today, and you just wind up with like, okay, there's the mafia and the mob, and there's like, okay, there's like the Nazis and the Allies, and like, okay, and I'm not saying which side is good or evil. I'm just saying that like there seems to be a religious bent to a lot of history that is, in many ways, like the conspiracy theory history traces both of those directions rather closely. And it's super interesting when you get into like the Vatican conspiracies and you realize that like the Vatican and the mafia are like very tied together. They're doing a lot of the same shit. And so then when this dude betrays the Vatican and they like, who are they going to ask to get him? The mafia, obviously, because the Vatican is from Italy and it's basically the Roman Empire became the Vatican, right? For simplicity's sake.
Right.
And so in some ways, I mean, for a very oversimplified version of it, just for like the storybook version, it sort of is like the Holy Roman Empire became the Catholic Church in the Vatican and that whole conspiratorial power base. And then the Rothschild banking dynasty and the Israelites and the Jewish, global power systems became the modern day Israeli state. And I don't know if they're together now, working together, or if they're at war still, or even if that's like in any way real. It's just like an interesting, like kind of thread to read through history on.
Then you got George Soros.
Oh yeah.
How is that guy still alive?
Dude, I don't know. I'm hoping, well, here's the problem. You know about his son marrying Huma Abedin?
Yeah. What was that about? Who is that again?
So Huma, we're about to go Pizzagate. Huma,
I knew it was going to happen.
Is deeply tied to Hillary Clinton in a big way. And I've not done the deepest dives on it, but Huma is deeply tied to a lot of the allegations about Clinton and Haiti and is deeply tied to the whole Anthony Weiner thing is my understanding. And Anthony Weiner is the frazzle drip thing.
Yeah.
And everyone should do their own research on that and, be careful what you believe and think for yourself. All I know is that...
I'm talking about the guy who sent the pictures of his wiener, right?
No,
the different guy.
No.
Who's
No,
Anthony
no,
Weiner?
No, that was him.
that's the guy.
Anthony Weiner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
but
sent the
that's
dick
not
pics.
what's important about him.
He went on Patrick Bet David.
But that's not what's important about him.
Right,
That is just
okay.
a distraction. What's
Okay.
important about him is that his laptop was full of some of the most up, depraved communications about clearly child king.
Dude, just look at him. He looks like a demon.
He's deeply evil. Like
he looks like a
deeply
demon.
evil. If anyone doesn't know about Frazzle Drip, obviously you cannot confirm or deny it for yourself. You can't confirm for yourself anymore because it has been fully scrubbed off the internet. Like the Clinton emails, are pretty scrubbed. Like WikiLeaks kind of got up over that. But like the Clinton emails was just like the tip of the iceberg there. It was actually the Wiener laptop was far more damning and far more complicated. And it was Wiener and Clinton and the Podestas, Huma Abedin was right up in there. And I don't know, I can't personally verify if the Wiener laptop is for sure real or not because it's been so thoroughly scrubbed. But there's reports of the police investigating it. There's, whatever. But I do know that what is still available on the internet in the Clinton emails are deeply incriminating. And I do know that I dug into how Pizzagate was debunked, and it was wildly unsatisfactory. Like so beyond an unsatisfactory debunk, I don't even know how to describe it.
How so?
In the short version, we can dig into it more if you want, but the very short version is just that it was the textbook version of put up a straw man that is not actually what the conspiracy theory is, and then knock it down. And so the claim, right, the official version of it was debunked before the guy that did this debunk got arrested for child, which is a real story, is that conspiracy theorists believe that Hillary Clinton is running a global child ring out of the basement of a pizza parlor, which sounds totally retarded.
Yes.
And then this conspiracy theorist that believed it went in there with an AR-15 and shot and threatened all the staff in order to show him the basement. And there was no basement, and he got all embarrassed and he got arrested. He shot the place up or whatever, this crazy lunatic QAnon guy.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so dangerous to believe conspiracy theories. Totally debunked. And there's this perfect soundbite that they got from him where he is quoted in every single article as saying something along the lines of I just was so sure it was there and it's just not. I guess you just can't believe everything or something, something that was that level of you could not have written a better pre-planned statement if you had tried. And A, that's not the claim. And B, that is not a satisfactory, just because you have a news story about totally not a CIA operative going in and pretending to shoot a place that none of that is a debunk because the actual claims are far more complicated and far more vast and are very much just visibly there on the internet. James Alefantis's Instagram page is so beyond disturbing. It's been scrubbed now, but it's all been archived and saved by people. It's
this is the guy with the gun?
No. James Alefantis is the owner of that pizza parlor.
Oh, okay.
And so the actual allegation is not that Hillary Clinton is personally running a child ring out of the basement of that pizza parlor. And by the way, by describing this, I'm not saying that I believe every bit of this is true. I'm just saying that as a journal, it is our job to learn what the actual claim is, right? Before you can even debunk it. So I went looking, what is the actual claim? And the actual claim is just that there is a global child trafficking network that exists. And in order to have such a network, you have to have front businesses out of which you operate the various nodes of that network. If you want to sell children to rich people, you have to have a place where they can go and buy them. Right? You have to have places where they're holding them. You have to have places where you're transporting them through. That's how you run a business.
Right.
And so the claim was that this pizza parlor was one part of that vast network and there was shady business happening out of it. And when you look at James Alefantis' Instagram page, who's the owner of the pizza parlor, who is like Hillary Clinton is just throwing pizza parties, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they are literally just throwing pizza parties. They're good friends with this guy, James Alefantis, who's just a random dude. There's a photo on James Alefantis' Instagram page of Barack Obama playing ping pong with an unnamed child. Can you find him
still on the internet if you look for him?
Yeah, if you go to X especially, because his Instagram has been deleted.
I can't figure out how to search on X, no matter how much I try.
Well, there's a search bar. I
know there's a search bar, but when I search for shit, I can't figure out how to find.
It is kind of tricky. But yeah, if you search James Alefantis Instagram or, James Alefantis Instagram
on X
photos. You could try it on the internet and see what you pull up. You'd have to
Instagram
go,
too.
far more than just his name though.
Yeah, James Alefantis Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or just Instagram posts. This will probably bring a lot of it up. But there's a photo of Barack Obama playing ping pong with an unnamed child. But then there's photos of kids with their hands bound, and there's commenters that are saying like, ooh, looks tasty, or it's like so beyond creepy. I can't even begin.
On his Instagram?
Yeah, it was like
so why
openly
why
on
would
his
he post that shit on
well,
his Instagram?
because no one was there, because no one was actually looking at his Instagram. It was just because Instagram is actually full of predators. Instagram is full of it is super dark. Yeah, it'll all be censored off of Google image results for sure. But what you want to find is someone who is archived. There's one to the left there. So that's a real photo from his Instagram that got posted on his real
kid
Instagram.
with his hands taped?
Yeah, a child with their hands taped down with the photographer right behind them. And they have intentionally blurred the comments because of how up the people that are commenting on this guy's page are. And it's like, and it's not just one. It is like every photo on the dude's Instagram was, before it got scrubbed, just so beyond what the am I reading right now?
This is like where I have trouble with shit. Like when you see stuff like this, the news posting, there it is on uncensored. Zoom in on it.
Oh.
You just had the uncensored version. Can you punch in on it, see what it says? Jen
new seating area
truck, new
/
seating area
for
your youngest guests.
Hilaire.
Seems pretty creepy, bro.
Yeah.
So-
and then there's another one that would be, there's like one of a baby eating some money or something.
So like this is where I have trouble with this shit. Like when you have random photos of this that are being talked about on the news, that are being pieced together with some crazy conspiracy, it's like you don't even have to fucking vet it and show your sources. You're just, it's like this just recently happened with the Trump thing. There's this whole thing that was going on Fox and CNN. They were all showing the photo of this bicycle that they were saying was the gunman's bike.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we got a bike. It's right here. And it was everywhere, all over the mainstream media. But then Andrew Callahan of Channel 5, he has a YouTube channel, used to be called All Gas, No Brakes. He fucking interviewed this dude after the Trump shooting, like the day after, in front of a convenience store, of the guy riding the same exact bike.
Yep.
So it clearly, like, he was just mocking it. Can you go to
That's a good one to look at right there with the but anyways.
Yeah.
You are exactly right, and you have a great point here that you don't even have to, well, actually no, I would rebut that. No, you totally do have to vet all of that. Like you can't just trust those images for face value. You can't just trust that, like, because someone could totally make up a fake James Alefantis Instagram post and just fucking run with this. And so you actually
and somebody could have been making a joke like, oh, kid, like my kid likes to break shit or likes to throw shit. So I taped his hands to the table.
It's the totality of the evidence that has to be vetted. And that's what I wound up doing is like, not just find like people claim, it's like go to all of the various like journalists at the time that got discredited for reporting on it, go to site after site after site after site and make sure they all agree, make sure they all align. Because you can't, in the day of the internet, you can't really tell what's real and fake. And all you can really do is sort of go to every source that's reporting on a thing and try to assess, are they all agreeing, and how many of them are trustworthy, and what are their motives, and who's discrediting it, and how are they? So you have to take in everything into effect.
Then you got to factor in AI.
Bingo. But this is before AI, and it all broke before AI.
Yeah.
And when you do that process with James Alefantis' Instagram is just like one tiny piece of it, but it's a particular like startling one. And when you apply that process to it, it becomes pretty obvious that the people that are debunking Pizzagate are trying very hard to ignore his Instagram and to scrub it off the internet and to not talk about it and to sort of like belittle it. And everyone that is pointing it out is sharing the exact same information and the exact same posts and photos with very much the exact same data that was taken at the time of it originally breaking when it was still up.
Right. But also to play devil's advocate, just because people are suppressing stuff about Pizzagate doesn't mean they're in on this stuff. It could just mean they support Hillary Clinton.
100%.
And they don't.
100%.
Could have donated to some guy at Google. What's the guy's name who's been donating
Sergey
to Kamala?
Brin, Larry Page?
Schmidt.
Oh, Eric Schmidt.
Eric Schmidt. Right.
Yeah.
It's like we're not going to fucking let any conspiracies about Hillary or Bill come out. So whatever. We don't know anything about child sex trafficking, but
I mean,
everyone's going to be like, look at them. They're owls.
Yeah, so I'm not claiming, I don't know what to believe. All I know is that there's something there that is being covered up in some way. And I certainly you can't infer that everyone covering it up has, like, because, at this point we have a huge mind virus in our world, unrelated to this, that is just people that have picked a political side.
Oh, it's like Sunni versus Shia.
Anything.
It's crazy.
Yeah, they'll just
religion.
Anything, right? And so I think a lot of the press coverage is just that. And the thing that got me started on it was actually that like I didn't know anything about it. And I wanted to look it up of like how it was when the guy that debunked it got arrested for child. And I was like, that's fucking weird. Like, let me look into this whole thing. Yeah. And I found the first article I found was like a Politico article or, one of these very basic mainstream news sources that was debunking Pizzagate. And they linked all their sources in the article. And so I was like, good, we linked our sources. Perfect. And I clicked on the link and it linked to another Politico article that was their source about it. So it's like a Politico debunk linked to a Politico debunk. And I started doing it with every single link on the page. And it was all just this incestuous web of them writing a bunch of articles debunking it, linking between them all. And I'm like, something smells here. I'm going to look deeper. And that's when I started to look deeper and started to just realize that like, there's something here and I don't know what it is.
Here's the thing. People like me and you have the luxury of time to like research this stuff and really dig deep. Most people don't have that time. They're just scrolling through Instagram memes.
And I think it's by design. Not by design by like some global cabal that's like, or just by design of like, if we don't have time to do anything except for like go to work, spend our money on our essentials and like on some drugs to party with tonight and then go to work again tomorrow. That's like the most epic dream for like the whole corporate club of rich people that control our world ever. You don't even need some like big conspiracy for that to be the most beneficial scenario for them.
Right.
And so the more economic hardship, the better. The more, political strife that keeps us just arguing over bullshit, the better. The more culture wars, the better. Because that way we're not looking at what's really going on up there. And that's been sort of my take or goal from the start is like, I want to know what's going on because I realized that I didn't know shit about what I was talking about because everything was just me regurgitating. Like I saw one YouTube video and now I have an opinion. And I was like, I should probably research these things and actually learn what is going on. But then I started to realize that like, it's like, no one has time for this shit and everyone's opinion is based upon these quick clips. And so like the more of us that are spending, at least trying our best to try to push the collective envelope towards more sources and skepticism and honest debate, because like we'll all have different opinions, right? We'll all read the evidence differently and have but as long as we're pushing like the core values of like evidence, respectful debate, difference of opinions, basic journalistic, like kind of just like debate, like the process of inquiry that has led to the Academy of Ideas that we've built our entire civilization on.
Right.
As long as we're generally got more of those people, and you're a great example of that, just kind of like working in the space collectively so that way the regular people that don't have time, more and more of their media sources are following these, principles and ethics that hopefully lead us towards good information. The better everyone off will be, because if none of us do it, then it'll just be like the CIA, the mainstream corporate media that's paid for by the corporations. Like there's a lot of monetary incentive to control what we think about products, about politics, about everything in this world. You can make money off of anything. And so it's, and I guess a lot of my followers have a problem with me because I've sort of like gone deeper and deeper into the conspiracy rabbit holes, which is fair. That's cool. But I think that people don't have the time to realize how much money can be made off of so many things. And a lot of them are very controversial. And for one of the big ones I haven't really gone into a whole lot yet is the whole transgender thing, in the sense that like, I think the debate is oversimplified on both sides. But one thing I know for sure is that no one is really talking about how much money is getting made off of transgenderism. Like that is a huge cash cow. Like
you're talking about with like the clinics where they can go and get the therapy with like the
I'm talking about
hormone blockers and stuff?
every aspect of transgender like care and treatment in every way is a gold mine. Because so the reason, and vaccines are a controversial one, and the reason why they're so beneficial for pharma to sell vaccines is because normally you only treat people that are sick. But a vaccine is suddenly a medication that you sell to everyone. And so you just went from selling your product to 2% of the population or 0.5% of the population to 100% of the population. And the economy of that is just insane. So the other thing that's really beneficial for pharma is when you get a lifelong patient. right? You don't want to cure people. You want to sell them therapies that they are dependent on for their whole life, right? That's ideal. And there's no better way to do that than to chop off the organs that produce the hormones that are essential for us to live, right? And I'm not saying that it's like, I'm not saying trans people are evil. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying that it's a very complicated discussion, and people should think very carefully about the information in that space, because pharma, if you take puberty blockers as a kid, pharma has just made a customer for the rest of your life, and there's no other option. Because if you take puberty blockers or have a surgery that makes you so you can't produce hormones, you damn well better be certain that you want that to be the rest of your life, because it is the rest of your life. And it's hard to look up how much money they make off of it, and I have tried, but it's somewhere in the ballpark of maybe like $100,000 to $300,000, give or take a huge range for a whole lifetime of care per person.
I don't think this shit's gonna last. I don't think this shit's gonna last much longer.
It's just so counter to truth and to like obvious science. It's like so clearly a social contagion.
Yes,
that,
it's very obvious.
Yeah, like Megan Fox does not have 3 trans children. It's just not how, like, you don't go from having like very, very, very few like people with gender dysphoria and trans, like, you know, genetics or mindsets, whatever it is, to today, a woman can have 3 children that all just happen to be trans. And you're telling me that is not socially imparted to them?
Right.
And I am raised by 2 teacher educators, and I spent
both your parents are teachers?
Yeah. So they taught teachers. My dad taught teachers at a university level for my whole life. And my mom was the principal of a school after a career of teaching teachers also.
Oh, wow.
And so I started teaching when I was 14 as a volunteer, and I had my first paid teaching job when I was 16.
No shit.
And I taught from like 16 to like 28 or something like that. And I'd never had a degree. I was just like good at it, and like got in and then got recommended. And so I just like kind of hopped through really cool teaching jobs. But I've worked with all ages of kids from like pre-K through high school and middle school. And there is nothing like more clear when you've worked with kids than how impressionable they are. Like, kids don't know what's real.
No.
And if you teach kids that it's okay to bully people, then it's okay to bully people.
Right.
If you teach kids that you always hold the door for people, then they always hold the door for people.
Right.
If you teach them there's 500 genders, then there are 500 genders, and they don't know this stuff.
Right.
And so when you pair teaching kids this, like, clearly not, like, there are X and Y chromosomes. Like, sure, you can feel however you want to feel, but like, there are X and Y chromosomes.
By the way, you don't normally teach young kids about sex anyways.
No, not a chance. Not even close. It's so messed up. And it's like, I can think of no more red line in the sand for me. Like, and so here's the thing is that I was like totally, like, I'm a liberal from the left from Washington State. Like, I've only changed as the left has changed, and as I've learned. But I'm like a total ally to gay people are totally like a part of the universe. And I disagree with sort of like the right wing, like gay people are evil and gay people like, sure, even if you were right, I don't care. Gay people are part of the world.
Did you see the girl who had I forget her name, the lesbian athlete? I can't believe I forgot her name. You can maybe find it, Steve. She had a great tweet about the Olympics opening ceremony thing. She was basically explaining how, like, she was like, these people, when you're doing this kind of stuff and like pushing this, shoving this down people's throats, you're taking somebody who like maybe was like a really religious conservative type maybe 10 years ago, who's come around now, maybe they made some gay friends, they understand it now, then they get slammed in the face with this, and now they're taking a U-turn, going right back in the other direction, and showing this, like, shoving this transgender crazy wacko and shit down in people's throats is making people just do a U-turn. It's building 100%. It's building a barrier to where people are like, I don't want anything to do with this anymore. And it's dragging the normal gay and lesbian people through the mud.
Yeah. It's beyond, I don't want to have anything to do with this anymore. It's, I have to fight this at any cost. And I'm kind of one of those people in the sense that I would never raise a child in a state where there are any laws on the books that in any way give anyone power to give my kids puberty blockers. Right. Outside of my control, 100%, like not even a chance. And so, like, I see this.
Aaron, is it Aaron? Might be Aaron, top one.
Yeah, I see it as an existential threat. And I'm like an ally to gay people and even to trans people. I think that adults should be able to do what they want. I don't care. Just once you start pushing it to children, that's where, like, people that were allies to the cause are suddenly like, I have to oppose you. Like,
Yes.
and I think that there's this
building a
weird,
barrier.
they're intentionally trying to keep the whole LGBTQ tribe as one tribe so they can take them all with them. But it's like, no, dude, your movement is getting co-opted. Just like Black Lives Matter was co-opted. Like Black Lives Matter started out probably, I think, as like the real thing. And then it clearly became something else.
Yes.
And I think that happens to a lot of social movements these days. And I think that sometimes it is intelligence agencies. And I think sometimes it's other things.
Yeah, if you're the CIA, I don't think you'd want, it's not in the country's best interest to have everybody be reliant on medicine and reliant on doctors to survive for the rest of their lives. It's counterintuitive to having a strong country. You don't want your.
I don't think the CIA is incentivized for us to have a strong country.
Really?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that the CIA is even incentivized to keep America strong, like healthy and strong anymore. In theory, they are. Like
in theory, the CIA's incentive is for America to remain the #1 global superpower in the world.
Not necessarily. Do you know who runs the CIA right now?
I forget their name. Who is it?
His name is I'm forgetting his name. I know his face really well because I did a piece.
Burns.
Yeah, William
Is it
Burns.
Bill Burns?
It's
Okay.
Bill Burns. And do you know that he is a friend of Epstein?
I've probably heard that somewhere.
So he was an ambassador for the U.S. He was an ambassador to Russia. He was an ambassador. He like had a very long diplomatic career. Very successful guy.
Pull up Bill Burns' profile.
Yeah, his Wikipedia page has it. And when he finished being the ambassador to Russia, I believe it was in 2009 or 2013, he needed a new job, and he went to Jeffrey Epstein for help getting a job. And Jeffrey Epstein helped him get a job at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which he was at until he became the CIA director. And the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace is one of these globalist think tanks, pretty similar to like the Council on Foreign Relations. It's like very kind of sus. And so currently, what I was saying
Bill
is
Burns the one who was tied to the school that he went to? That school that he attended in New York that had all those crazy like elites that went there? All like the wealthy people in New York, all their kids went to this school that Epstein went to.
Dalton School?
The Dalton School, yeah.
Did Bill Burns go to the Dalton School?
Bill Burns is...
That would be crazy. I didn't know that. If he did, that's crazy.
Maybe I might be thinking of somebody else.
But regardless, what I'm saying is that like Bill Burns, maybe he's incentivized to keep America strong, but like I don't know if that's necessarily the top of his mind. Like I feel like he's probably sexually blackmailed.
There it is. What's that say? The documents indicate that Epstein had 3 scheduled
That's
meetings.
about their
with
meetings.
That's that's not him.
That's not it.
I don't think he attended Dalton School.
I'm thinking of somebody else who was.
I would remember that.
No, I don't think it
There
was
was some
him.
other CIA
So,
or FBI big shot that went there.
So Antony Blinken, his stepdad was like all up. His stepdad is a whole freaking rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of people kind of at the top of the intelligence state right now that like honestly don't really seem to have America's best interest in mind. And like if they did, they would close our border, for example. Like they would have closed our border like 10 years ago if they did have America's best interest in mind. And even if they do have sort of America's best interest in mind, like our country's, our regular people's best interest is super different than our states, like than the club's best interest, right? In the sense that
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think their club is the most important thing to them, and the American government is the most important thing to them, not the American citizens.
And so where we started was with like a medicated populace. And actually it's like way easier for the club to stay the club if we are medicated to death and if we're all sick and can barely get by and just producing. But the thing is, we don't even need to produce for that much longer because AI robots are about to be literally walking around in our households. Have you seen Optimus from Tesla?
I think so, yeah.
Dude, the robot that looks just like iRobot. And it's like now it's walking upstairs and shit and like carrying. It's like, oh my God. Like we are literally within 5 years of iRobot robots in our homes, like with full on AI.
Dude, I can't wait.
Dude, I don't even know what to think.
Also, what do you make about this whole narrative with Trump's beef with the CIA? I don't know how real that is.
I don't either.
I think that's a pretended narrative because he made, who's the girl that he made the head of the CIA?
I don't know actually.
She was the girl, she was the woman who burned all the torture documents.
Oh, interesting.
She was the White House, the White House chief of staff, basically.
Gina Haspel?
Gina Haspel.
Gina Haspel. I've not done any digs on her.
She was the one person that the White House went to her to do not destroy any of the documents. Then the CIA director, I think it was Jose Rodriguez, went to her and said, "You destroy everything," and she did it. So
Classic CIA.
If there's any CIA officer or operative or anyone in that agency who's going to do what you say, it's Gina Haspel.
Yeah.
Who's got. And Trump put her as the fucking head of the agency.
Trump put a lot of weird people as the head of a lot of weird places that like don't line up with what the right and the Trumpers and like they would all have us believe about. I just don't know what to make of him. And I'm not super optimistic. I want to like to be honest, the world would be so great if all the Q people were right about everything. Like that'd be badass. Like most people I think don't even realize what they claim, but basically what they claim is that Trump is part of sort of like a deep intelligence agency, like anti-CIA sting operation that is like,
And he wants to like take out all the predators and all the traffickers.
yeah, not even that he's necessarily in charge of it. He's just sort of like as an asset of essentially a secret global intelligence agency that is basically taking out and the predators and the corrupt government officials and the deep state and everything. And it's like, oh, that'd be so badass. Like, yeah. But like, do I see evidence that supports
There's
that
no
all?
evidence for that, yeah.
There's a lot of coincidences, but it's like, that's not evidence. Like, that's not enough for me to, like, it's enough for me to watch and be like, that's funny and entertaining. And it's like, because that's the thing about conspiracy theories is I like to be aware of them all, like the Pizzagate thing, for example. I like to be aware of it so that as new stuff comes out, I know how to sort of like, what does this fit into and what does this debunk and prove and whatever. But like, I don't know if that's true. I don't see any evidence right now. Like, and so that would be sweet. But today, Trump looks a lot more like, if I had to pick a side of the spectrum, he looks a lot more like a CIA op than like some deep state, killer or whatever.
Yeah, because I mean, he could have dismantled the CIA, but when he was president in 2016, 2017,
Could have done a lot of things.
But he did not. He went in the opposite direction of that.
Yeah, my fear is that whether he's complicit or not, they handled him so well. Like they used him to polarize this nation. They used him to create this like absolute derangement amongst the Democratic Party.
Yes.
And they used him to create this absolutely like fervorous derangement in the Republican Party once he lost in 2020. And like, so in a lot of ways, even if he wasn't complicit, he got played by the media, by the state, by just sort of like the establishment as it is. And they're doing just fine today because of it. And so I'm worried that regardless of whether he's literally in on it or not, they actually want him to win this time around. And I'm worried
It looks like they did.
It looks like it.
Everything they did. Can show trials, making him a martyr.
Yeah,
and
like
then,
literally. I mean,
the
shooting at him.
assassination thing, like that. I thought after that happened, I was like, holy, it's over. I'm like, there's no way anybody could beat Trump after this. And now, like, it's like we're.
And then we've got all
Groundhog
these
Day.
fake polls that are showing that Kamala Harris has like 50% of the vote all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Going from like 3% of her party's vote, 4 or 6 years ago, whatever, to like, what?
Right. And it, like at the very least, when it comes to like, obviously there's a difference between when they become president and like their cabinet and who they pick to run the White House versus their campaign and what they run on. But like, if you just want to compare the campaigns of Kamala and Trump, okay, if he's a fucking liar and if he is only interested in himself, at the very, very least, at least he's pretending to be anti-war, and at least he's pretending to support the grassroots, and at least he's pretending to get behind Bitcoin. They're not even pretending.
No, they're like openly pushing socialist policies.
Yes.
Like they're openly pushing like not just socialist policies, but just kind of like, I don't even know how to get into how, I mean, my contention is not like, I don't trust what either of them say. And so I tend to look behind them at who is supporting them. Right.
Peter Thiel.
Exactly. And Trump does not get an A on that report card.
I was hoping we were going to talk about Peter Thiel.
But Peter Thiel is like one of the darkest mofos on the planet. And his recent Joe Rogan appearance
I didn't
is
watch it
like,
yet, but
that kind of felt like a humiliation ritual. That kind of felt like, what's going on, Joe? Why? What? Like, you're not believing this shit, are you? That felt so scripted. But
did you watch it?
Not all of it. No, just part of it.
Did you see the New York Times article that came out about the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp?
No, but Karp is
Pull up that article.
Yeah. Karp is
I didn't know anything about him until I read that.
Yeah. Most people don't.
Long article.
I don't know a ton about him, but it was earlier on in all of this that I started to dig around in Palantir's dirty laundry, and Karp and Theil obviously were the top of that list.
The top with the New York Times one. Yeah, 3 days ago. 3 days ago. Nope.
I also tend to not even read New York Times articles because I don't have their paywall.
That one.
And they learned how to beat the 12-foot, the 11-foot ladder or whatever that was.
This one's not behind the paywall.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, man, he's super interesting. So apparently he's self-proclaimed progressive. Very progressive, unlike Peter. He says they went to college together and they would always like go to the bar and debate politics, like this left-wing Theil or right-wing Theil versus a left-wing Karp, and like they somehow became friends and respected each other because they had these like, you know, crazy debates with each other. And when after 9/11, I guess Peter was like, "Hey man, we could apply some of this technology we use to PayPal to catch terrorists." And he saw an opportunity there, and he's like, "I'm going to make you the CEO of the company." But like Karp, he's into like Kundalini yoga and Tai Chi, and like he's donating tons of money to Kamala Harris. He like openly says in this article that he's supporting Kamala Harris, even though Peter Thiel's supporting not directly Trump, but he's supporting his vice president. I forget his name.
Vance.
JD Vance. Yeah.
That's how much I like JD Vance.
So like,
I mean, how could you better represent the CIA and they're sort of like
that's the thing though. So he's
plot.
like he projects himself to be like this progressive liberal who is, I think he's half black.
What?
Yeah, he's half black, and he's I forget the other half. Anyways, he's
I think
half
it's
black.
like some weird country that we've never heard of.
Yeah, he's half black, half something else. Maybe it's Jewish.
I kind of think it is. I didn't want to say it before I look it up, but
but like on the other side of the coin, he's like he has very different ideologies than typical Silicon Valley billionaires who are, you could call them more of like woke, anti-America.
Yeah.
He is very, very like interventionalist.
Esoteric and
very, very interventionalist. Like he thinks wars, like he thinks we should be over there intervening
in Israel
and taking control of the world.
Well, he is the son of a Jewish clinician, pediatrician, and an African-American mother.
There you go.
So he's super, one thing I do know about him is he's a super Zionist.
Okay.
As is Peter Thiel. But
right.
Do you know it? I mean, I assume his stance on Ukraine is also like, we got to be in Ukraine.
I assume, I don't think they talk about it in the article, but he's very much like the other people in Silicon Valley, like Apple and Google. They're like, we're not going to, like they did, I think Google got some pushback for doing a deal with the government, with the Pentagon. Remember when Google was doing something with the Pentagon with like tracking drone or analyzing drone footage or something like that?
Before people realized how much Google does with the Pentagon.
Right. And then Google pulled out of that because of the PR.
Yeah.
And then Palantir swooped right in and took it.
Yeah.
He's like, it's so, he was pointing out in the article, like they were interviewing him about it, and he was like, it's a paradox that these billionaires who get to live in America and make all this money in Silicon Valley and benefit from being in this country are refusing to help our military, because our military is what makes this country and what gives us this opportunity to live the way we live and to operate these businesses and live these lavish lifestyles. So that he goes, I'm going to support the military and I'm going to support making this country the #1 superpower in the world. He is dying. He's living and dying.
To be fair, at least respect for being, upfront about that, because that is what they are all pushing, just in their own kind of like subversive, weird way.
Yes.
They just, are trying to pretend like that's not who they are.
Yep.
But Palantir has been CIA through and through basically since the start, and man, it has not changed one bit.
In 2011, I think the anonymous group hacked Palantir, and they found out that Palantir was a part of a disinformation campaign to smear WikiLeaks.
I've not looked into this leak. That sounds freaking cool.
Yeah, I don't know if you can find something on that, but find a anonymous Palantir WikiLeaks. They tried to it was a misinformation campaign to smear WikiLeaks supporters and to smear Glenn Greenwald, I think.
Yeah.
So they're doing a lot of shit.
Yep. Yeah.
But
yeah, WikiLeaks cracked open a set of eggs that like was unique in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Interesting. I'm going to dig
This
into that
guy,
later.
Alex, dude, he's super interesting.
Yeah, and he's one of those ones that I think a lot of people don't know about, like a lot of regular folks, us, we don't know about him, but he's wields so much influence in those upper circles. And I think a lot of us don't think about how their acts are to, like, you know, influence us in some ways. But I think a lot of times their acts are also to influence each other. Because, for example, Alex Karp and Peter Thiel are way closer to the, like, primary intelligence agendas than a lot of the other celebrities and a lot of the other billionaires, because they have direct contracts with the CIA. They have direct contracts with those guys. And so they have a level of read in and a level of, like, aligned interests with the CIA is just one example that many of these other tech CEOs and, like, people further removed, like Hollywood celebrities, don't have.
Right.
But they're still walking in the same circles and going to the same parties and sort of like, so that group think is real for those folks as well as it is for us. So I think that Karp is a good example of one who plays a pretty interesting and maybe dark role in all that. But
There's a quote in the New York Times article where he literally said, he goes, yeah, saving lives and taking lives is super interesting. That was his quote. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's super sociopathic.
Super sociopathic, on the spectrum. Like, he's really
It goes with the territory.
He's really introverted.
I mean, that's how a lot of those guys are.
Yeah.
That's like kind of how else are you going to become a successful tech entrepreneur that's like a super mega genius? Dude, did you hear about the boat that sank yesterday with the CEO of not the CEO, the chairman of Morgan Stanley on it, along with this tech entrepreneur, dude. So I was just making a post about this in the parking lot before we started this, because yesterday the news broke that this super mega yacht, this luxury mega yacht, sank off the coast of Sicily, and aboard. So it was a party. It was a free, like, get out of jail party for this British tech entrepreneur who's like the Bill Gates of the UK is what they call him. Because he had just beat these charges that he'd been fighting since 2011. The US had extradited him from the UK to face these charges of corruption or fraud, because he had invented this company that he had sold to HP, Hewlett Packard, for like $11 billion. And they said that he had totally cooked the books and it was all fraudulent. And it was actually only worth like $3 billion. And so anyways, years and years of legal battles, and he just beat the charges, which is like a 0.5% chance of beating federal charges like that. So, that's crazy. But he beats them. He goes out on this party, and then his yacht gets hit by a freak like tornado / water spout geyser that like cracks the mast and sinks the ship in the middle of a freak storm when there's like, it's anchored off the coast, like a mile or so off the coast, and there's other boats all around. And the first responders were actually a boat next door that's just like, you know, stabilized itself with its motor, and then realized that that boat sank. And they went and started rescuing people. But all of, like, a bunch of the crew got rescued, but basically all the important people died.
What?
And one of them was the CEO founder of this company. The other one was the guy from Morgan Stanley, along with like a couple of his lawyers and stuff. But it gets weirder.
How long after he beat the
guy in
case?
the red shirt right there in that photo, that is one of the other founders of that company that was then in charge of this other and he was part of the lawsuit, this fraud lawsuit that they just beat. He gets hit by a car while he's out running 2 days ago or 3 days ago, right? Like last week. So they beat the case like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm approximating here. And then he gets hit by a car last week, and then his boat sinks in this crazy freak water spout just yesterday. And the companies, so the technology that they had developed, the original technology that the guy at the bottom developed, this famous Bill Gates-like guy, it is like an AI software that is, and remember, it was invented back like 2008, 9, 10, 11 kind of, like they sold in 2011. It was an AI software that allows AI to comb through and analyze and like organize data from videos and audios and live streams. So it's like back in the early days of, you know, before we even knew what AI was about to do. And it was the ability for AI to monitor our videos and to surveil us through our videos and our live streams and all of they had a special term for it, like real or like, basically to analyze like organic human interaction on the internet through all the media formats and to surveil it and track it and act upon it. He invented that technology, and then he sold it to HP. for all this money. And that's what this fraud case is all about. The dude that got killed running by the car in the red shirt there, he had left that company to run the spin-off company called Dark. It was like, it's like, okay, I got to research that. It's like, what is this name? Why are you calling it that? And it's basically spinning off that technology to use AI to defend against cyber attacks. And the way that, and this is just basically right off their Wikipedia page in layman terms, but it's basically using AI to get the base state of any network of like, how does this network normally operate? And I'll analyze it, and get the normal version of it. And so anytime there's an irregularity, I can sense that. And they would use that to defend against cyber attacks. And what they claimed, their company claimed, is that they could defend against zero-day exploits. And I don't know if you know about cyber attacks and cyber war, but right, like if you could stop zero-day exploits, suddenly the entire NSA stockpile of 0 days is worthless. The entire Israeli stockpile is worthless. The Russian stockpile, everyone suddenly, and I'm sure that it's like it wouldn't be able to defend against all of them. But in theory, that technology opens the door to defending against all of them, right? So suddenly billions and billions and billions of dollars of cyber weapons have just been made useless by that company. And he gets killed by a car. He gets killed in this boat. It's like, what's going on? And they're not clueless to this. They're like sending teams to investigate the boat crash. Obviously, because that's like super suspicious. But it's like just such an interesting similar like meeting of where highly advanced tech meets with the interests of these various like deep government agencies, and like suddenly weird shit starts to happen. And anytime you get all those different components, it's like, I have questions. Yeah. Because, we know that they will do crazy things. Like, we know they have crazy technology. Like, the CIA has, like, in the Cold War, they had, like, a gun that could shoot a poisoned icicle at someone. Like, you know about the dart gun that would, like, shoot poison at you, but then the dart would melt, so it would never...
I never looked into it. I know they had a lot of crazy shit, like, to kill Castro.
Like, these crazy assassination weapons, these crazy technologies. It's like, and they want all these crazy... And these guys are developing this crazy AI technology stuff, and it's just like... And I assume, if I had to guess, it's like, okay, beat them with lawfare first, put them away in prison, right? That'll shut them up. Then we'll get their technology. Yeah. It's all taken care of. Right. The other one, the AI company that the guy that in the red shirt was doing, this like cyber defense company, they were under short seller attacks, and there was companies trying to buy them out. So it's just like, it just kind of hit me. It broke yesterday, and I saw it and was like, man, this just has all the markings of this like ongoing battle for sort of control over technology. Yeah. And
bro.
Yeah.
If you want America to have all the number one tech and you want to be the number one superpower in the world, sometimes you got to sacrifice a few people.
Sometimes you got to crack a few eggs to make a giant technological AI omelet, dude.
Ian, dude, thank you so much for doing this, brother. We just did like 3 hours, 15 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, man.
That was gorgeous.
I knew this was going to be so much fun, man. Once I saw what kind of stuff you do and the people you have on, I was like, oh, man, this is going to be great.
This was fun.
Thanks, man.
I'll link all your shit below, but tell people that are just listening where they can find you on Twitter and your YouTube and all that.
Yeah. My TikTok is Cancel This Clothing Company. That's where I'm biggest, but that turns into on X, my handle is Cancel Cloco. And I'm just go by Ian Carroll, and I'm going to just start rebranding everything to Ian Carroll. Like I've got a YouTube and a Rumble and all that under Cancel This Conspiracy. But eventually you're just going to be able to find me everywhere as, no, not that, Cancel Cloco.
Cancel Cloco.
On X or Ian Carroll or Cancel This Clothing Company.
Just type in Ian Carroll, see what pops up.
Oh, you're on YouTube. On YouTube, it's Cancel This Conspiracy. But yeah, Ian Carroll shampoo. That's because I'm the shampoo guy, and people are searching for me for my TikTok shampoo video.
You have a shampoo video?
I broke.
Oh, there you go. Look, you popped up for me. What the fuck?
Bingo.
Oh, because you typed in Cancel This Conspiracy. That's why.
Yeah, under my name, I'm not there yet, but I'm gonna just rebrand everything to Ian Carroll.
Good move.
Yeah, because it's the way. And once I did that on X, it just made so much more sense.
Cool, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
well, thanks appreciate it.
This was super fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna start binge watching all of your content so I can learn from all the cool people you talk to, man.
That's cool. Yeah, we should definitely do this again.
Yeah.
We gotta get you back down to Florida.
Totally.
All right. Good night, everybody.